Okay, everybody, we're going to get started. Good morning to everyone online. I think at the moment we see that we have 32 online and then a group of folks in the room. Really happy for the folks that made the trip in today to Sacramento. First of all, I'm Loretta Moreno, Program Manager for the Timber Regulation and Forest Restoration Program. I'm joined by our leadership team and interagency leadership team representing this program, and they are all mostly, I think, all sitting, not all, but mostly all sitting on the right-hand side of the room, left-hand side to you. I'm gonna just kind of orient you as to the meeting format today, so that you're clear on why we're here today, the meeting format, and some of the aspects of facilitation and panel structure we've created for today. So if we could advance, I want to just give you an overview though of the agenda. So first of all, we have a Zoom audience that we definitely wanted to make sure could be in this engagement, whether or not they could travel to Sacramento. A lot of people live in far-flung places across the state, so we want to make sure this is accessible. So we'll have an in-room audience and an online audience, and we will accommodate comments from everybody. As far as the day's schedule, we're going to kind of introduce our leadership team. We're going to talk a little bit about program background with you all so that you're clear on really what the Timber Regulation Forest Restoration Program is geared to do, what the leadership role, the leadership team's role is in this. So level setting there. And then we're going to talk more about the Lean Six Sigma process and recommendations, and really turn the mic over to all of you to give your input on the recommendations today. So we'll talk more about that in a moment. We will have a break around 10:15 and comments starting at 10:30. This is all approximate, but we aim to commit to that. We will have an hour lunch break. We potentially, depending on the number of comments and interest, we could wrap up before lunch, or we offer an additional nearly hour after for follow-on comments. If for any reason comments continue to go past the end of the day, we will offer a way for you to still provide your comments after today's meeting. So with that, let's go to the next slide. So just to recap what we're after here today, we've conducted an analysis of our timber regulation and forest restoration program, and we performed a Lean Six Sigma analysis, which we will talk more about what that is in a little bit, to evaluate the effectiveness, the efficiency of our program operations, and explore ways that we can continuously improve as we operate this program more than 10 years in. So this is really an opportunity to build on those recommendations and get your additional considerations and the other dimensions you want us to be thinking about tied to that body of recommendations, so that we can prioritize our work as a leadership team running this program with over 200 program staff across several agencies, which I'll cover in a moment. Okay, next slide, please. All right, we're going to get into background. So AB 1492 was brought about in 2012. It was a very special piece of legislation that really created a funding source to manage forest resources of California in a more sustainable way and offer all the interagency review team, agency partners a consistent way to, funding source to coordinate and align themselves and review timber harvest plans across the state, among other activities that we endeavor to do. But this was really, I would say, a revolutionary bill to protect forest resources and make sure that the timber industry has a sustainable operating space in California as well, and protect the resources that we all care about. Moving to the next slide. I just want to step you through some of the legislation. I'm looking up here because I can see the slides. So I wanted to step you through some of the key tenets of the legislation. As the legislation says, it is the intent of the legislature to accomplish all of the following in enacting this legislation. So I'm going to, these are summarized bullets of what is actually in the legislation, but it's important everyone understands. So we are here to promote sustainable forest practices consistent with various state laws. Next slide. You can actually just hit a few. Yeah. We are also here to maintain that stable funding through that funding source for operations of the Forest Practice Program across California Geological Survey, CAL FIRE, Fish and Wildlife, water boards. I think Who am I missing? Did I miss anyone? And Board of Forestry and CNRA and CalEPA kind of all tie into that as well. And for the review team aspect, our goal and our mission is to support in-state production of timber and comply with environmental regulations, which are there to protect resources for the long haul. We also fund forest restoration and reforestation activities when funds allow and when allocated by the legislature, and that's one of our functions as the program. And we also advance broader forest management objectives aligned with greenhouse gas emissions reduction targets. So that's a big space we work in. We also are very focused on building and increasing transparency of the program and what we do and the outcomes and effectiveness and impacts of everything we're operating under our program, and then individual programs under that. And we work to build sustainable best management practices and working with industry and of course the broader NGOs. Go to the next slide, thanks. So more on, our mandates. We really are driving towards accountability, efficiency, establishing transparent ways to show how our program's operating and the effectiveness of all of that work. And so that is the collective duty of our leadership team who's here today to engage with all of you. You can see on this map, a statewide map of the different regions and units that cover all the agencies that tie into our program for timber harvest review purposes specifically. Next slide. So as far as leadership team, I did mention the different agencies. There is also Energy Safety, Office of Energy Infrastructure Safety is also a key partner for us, is for evident reasons. We have a lot of energy infrastructure throughout the forests of California. So they are on the Energy Safety team is on our leadership team and a very important partner. But this is the complement of the current leadership team composition that are here to oversee over 200 program staff across all of our departments. Next slide. So as far as what we do, I talked about this a little bit, but yeah, we are here overseeing the staff and the program operations, making sure we have that interagency cohesion and alignment that was intended by the legislation, and that we're delivering for the industry, delivering for our interested public who care about forest resources and their protection, and our interagency partners that need to be able to operate in a smooth manner with each other and with with sustainable funding and reliable funding to do that. So among other things that we're working on, we do inform rulemaking, we do inform legislation, we do help in policy making, either informing the forest practice rules in committee meetings or implementing legislation when it's handed down and interpreting that legislation. So these are activities of the leadership team. We also do engage in supporting emergency response, and that's really important. In recent months, in the last year in particular, we've really done so much work as a leadership team to expedite critical fuel reduction forest health projects, not just with the timber program, but also the broader forest management community in the state to achieve nearly 400 projects across the state, over 90,000 acres that have been expedited to protect forest resources and vegetation management and public safety. We broadly engage in forest resilience activities, like making sure that we have, biomass facilities that can receive the wood waste out of the forest to protect the forest from drought mortality, wildfire, and other threats. And we also engage in cutting the green tape initiatives, things of that nature. Next slide. So we do more. I won't go through each of these, but we're very engaged on monitoring at various levels to make sure that we are evaluating the effect and impact and effectiveness of the management we're doing. So we have the Board of Forestry Effectiveness Monitoring Committee. We have statewide monitoring underway. A lot of effort there. This is not the purpose of today's discussion, but a lot is happening in that space. And we're working to enhance and increase our stakeholder engagement, which we'll talk more about today. But we continuously do this with the industry, small landowners, NGOs, and so forth. And of course, we do our legislative reporting. So just the next slide is just a little bit of a peek at the various other pieces, which you can look at later. I will add that the slides will be available to people online after this meeting. We'll make sure to post it on our website. But this is just a flavor of all the other pieces that are complementary and on our plates as a leadership team and as a program to respond to. Next slide. This is important. There are activities that really are the decision of others. And it's important, some folks misunderstand what the leadership team is here to do. I stepped you through that, but others really are in the driver's seat, enacting rules, regulations, legislation, statute, so forth, in the forest and timber policy space, boards, commissions, the legislature, so forth, governor, executive orders, right? These are the decision makers in that policy space. We implement their decisions. We can inform them, but we implement. We are not the rule makers. The other piece to understand is that funding decisions are made by the Department of Finance, the legislature, and the governor. So we, advocate for our program and make sure that we have sufficient resources. At the end of the day, these are the decision makers that control the funding decisions, not us. That means, grants and whatever, staffing levels and so forth. And then land management priorities, such as activities in the demonstration forest, just for example. We certainly are interested in these things. That is not our purview to decide on, just to level set there about what we do, what others do. Okay, next slide. All right, so now we're going to pivot to Clint Snyder, who is going to introduce himself. He's with the Central Valley Water Board, and he's going to step you through what this Lean Six Sigma thing was, what the process looks like, who we engaged, and then we're going to get to recommendations and then move on from there. Thank you, Clint.
Thanks, Loretta.
Oh my gosh, I completely forgot to introduce before you. My apologies to everybody. We were going to have Lisa just make some opening remarks before we get into. Oh, that's really fine. My brain, I completely forgot. I should have a slide for it, but forgive me. But we do want to introduce our Deputy Secretary for Forest and Wildfire Resilience at the Natural Resources Agency to make just a few remarks before Clint goes.
Totally fine. No, just briefly. Hi, everyone. Good to see you here. I'm so glad to see folks turning out to launch this conversation with us. I recognize that there's been interest for a long time in having us do something through a Lean Six Sigma process. So I'm glad we've gotten to this point now where we've received some recommendations. It's the start of the conversation now, and I recognize too there's a lot of folks here in the room with a lot of institutional knowledge of this program and forest practices in the state. So I'm glad to see that you're here. Really look forward to the conversation. And as Lori said, there are going to be things that are in our purview as the 1492 leadership team to address some of the topics that will come up, but other topics will likely be in the wheelhouse of the board or other partners of ours. So I just kind of wanted to reiterate that. So, anyway, glad that we're here and looking forward to the conversation.
Awesome. Thanks, Lisa. As Reto said, my name is Clint Snyder. I'm an assistant executive officer at the Central Valley Water Board. I manage the board's Reading office, and my partner over there, Angela Wilson, is our program manager. I spent a lot of time with this group, a fantastic group of people, and fortunate that I had an opportunity to work with and meet a lot of you. So thank you for taking the time to be here today. Really looking forward to the feedback that you'll offer.
Louder.
Louder even? Okay.
You got quiet.
We can go to the next slide, please. So why Lean Six and why now? Just pause for a second. So what is the genesis of this? There's been a ton of work since 2012. Obviously, a lot of you have been part of that work since that time. Put a lot of time and energy into this program. Made a lot of improvements, process efficiencies, and that kind of thing since that time. Also, when Governor Newsom created the Wildfire Forest Resilience Task Force, part of that is to create a Wildfire Forest Resilience Action Plan. That action plan included a key action assigned to the 1492 leadership team, which really drove at creating a work plan for permit synchronization. YG Gentry and I co-chaired that particular project, put together a group of stakeholders, agency staff, really sort of got together and figured out how can we create this work plan. At the end of the day, the work plan, the meat of it, really called for an independent evaluation of the program by an outside party to essentially conduct a Lean Six Sigma analysis of the program. And, that's a big lift, right? At the end of the day, no one really likes to be critiqued on their work, their baby, so to speak. 1492 is kind of our baby in terms of the implementation of it. But nonetheless, while the program works really well, as anyone will tell you, there's always opportunities for improvement. And that's really why we hired and contracted with NIBAC and why we asked a lot of you to participate in that analysis. You can go to the next slide. You can just fill this one out. Yeah. We won't get into a lot of the details. Some of you were present on the 12th when NIBAC presented to the Board of Forestry. And some of these slides are direct from that presentation. But main points here are there's been a ton of work since 1945 through 73, 76, 94, on and on until current time, where we're really looking at just a further evaluation of the program, really trying to identify some recommendations that are meaningful, that all of you will help to provide some context to and have already. That will help us prioritize these recommendations and build them into a 5-year work plan that we'll talk about later. Next slide. So the whole premise of Lean Six Sigma, it's really two parts, Lean and Six Sigma, and it's kind of a combination of those two processes. They were really developed around military and manufacturing efficiencies, trying to identify ways to eliminate waste and create consistent processes, right? More reliable processes. Here, we rely on this particular, processes and procedures to analyze this multi-agency permitting process. And this isn't the first time it's been done for regulation. The water boards engaged with Caltrans not too long ago, using the Lean Six Sigma evaluation process to evaluate some multi-agency permitting pieces there too. We found it's really helpful. But here the primary points are define, right? State the problem, measure, build that hypothesis, analyze, improve, which is really develop those recommendations, and then, publish those recommendations and then start to act and implement those recommendations. So the report's been published, it's been presented to the Board of Forestry, and here we are today wanting to get a little bit more information from you on how best to implement those recommendations. So the information collection approach for this evaluation, and this is really just forms the basis for the rest of the presentation and a lot of the stuff that Cheryl's going to be discussing here in a minute. But NIBAC went through a process of, conducting interviews. Some of you participated in those one-on-one interviews or participated in the small group discussions or potentially the electronic survey that was sent out. And so we have all of that information, and that really was the foundation for the report. We'll talk about some of those pieces in a minute. The scope of that first piece, the purpose, so 21 individual interviews that included agency, industry, NGOs, and others, 1 tribal roundtable, 3 tribal consultations, and 4 focused group sessions, really trying to gather information and different perspectives of stakeholders, and all of those are engaged in this process so that we had an understanding of what those concerns were, and then to be able to roll those forward towards the recommendations. That was supplemented by that survey that I just talked about, 31 respondents. And then finally, an attempt to validate the available, the comments through available objective data. And that, fortunately for us, John and his team at CAL FIRE spent a lot of time mining the CalTrus database for us. Angela and her team and the North Coast Water Board spent a lot of time digging through the water board's databases and pulling up some stats on that, as did Elliot and his team with the Department of Fish and Wildlife. And that's really that objective analysis component. Next slide. So a number of reported challenges, and this is just a summary. If you had an opportunity to read the report, and if for whatever reason you don't have a copy or are unfamiliar where to get that copy, please see one of us and we'll be sure that we send you a copy of that report today via email, and you're welcome to distribute it. It goes into a lot more detail. Just trying to summarize this here. There are actually 9 of these. This is the first slide. The first,
Just a little louder.
little louder.
Yeah.
Okay. First one is areas of insufficient program clarity. So roles and responsibilities across all stakeholders, some points of confusion there. And then process requirements of governance was kind of a key thing. For folks that operated in the program consistently, mostly plan submitters and some of those folks, even there were some points of confusion. A lot of it related to level of experience and the number of plans that they actually submit. In other cases, it was really sourced from stakeholders, not really understanding at what point in the process do they have opportunities to engage, and where do they find information, who do they contact, things like that. Number two was lack of alignment on key shared outcomes and measures of success across relevant stakeholders. Three, issues with THP acceptance rates and turnaround times. This was a theme that we heard, right? And certainly a point that comes out in the recommendations, and certainly something that we want to spend some time on. There are real reasons for that, and some potential opportunities to try to lessen the number of plants that are returned. Ineffective and inconsistent agency and industry training. This was something that NIVAC identified that could probably benefit both sides, right? We as agencies certainly have particular challenges and guardrails around the number of staff that we can hire, when we can hire them and how we can hire them, right? That's government. And on the industry side, we understand too that, at times it can be difficult, to find foresters. And in other cases, sometimes they're just a retirement boom, a slug of retirees that requires, hiring a brand new staff and trying to onboard and train those staff. Those are just realistic challenges that I think we all sort of wrestle with in the day-to-day management of our organizations. So here are the other five. Inconsistent and non-existent communication protocols. I think that agencies that participate in the review team in a particular area have a pretty good understanding of what those communication protocols are and how we interact with one another. CAL FIRE being the lead agency, whether it's a PHI or THP or providing comments and that kind of thing. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the stakeholders have an understanding of how that works, right? So again, another opportunity for us to be maybe a little bit more transparent, maybe create some communication documents, things like that better relate what that process looks like and how we all interact. Again, some of the recommendations. 7, use of outdated submission processes and mapping standards. There's a wide variety of documents, things that come to CAL FIRE and to the Water Board and Department of Fish and Wildlife. Some of the old school methods really rely on kind of that paper, right? And then some of the newer folks that are coming into the field really relying more on the electronics. As agency staff, we can't say that doesn't work, that does yet. And we're not really to that point. And so we try to accommodate the different perspectives and methods that folks are using to submit the required materials. But that clearly is identified as an opportunity to create consistency that will also help to inform our data management sites and also help to inform stakeholders with regard to the transparency, the number of plans and the steps in which those plans are going through. Number 8, availability and experience profile of agency and industry resources. But that kind of gets back to that point that I was talking about earlier with we've got a wide variety, highly experienced folks that have been in the field for a long time, brand new folks that are just entering the field. How do you onboard, train those folks, get them up to speed to a point where they're sort of operating at a level that we all assume or are driving to be sort of the standard, right, of experience. And sometimes that just takes time, but there's some opportunities there here to address that as well.
Can
And
I
then
ask a
finally,
question about that, Clint? Sorry. So agency and industry resources is people?
people.
Okay.
Number 9, long-term sustainability of the current THP process, right? The whole goal of 1492 and some of the other bills that have come prior to 1492 is to create a sustainable timber harvest industry. It's more than just cutting timber fast, right? There are a lot of components. We live in the state of California. There are a lot of drivers, a lot of influences that we have to take into account. A lot of that's built into the Forest Practice Act and the Forest Practice Rules. Some of that's built into the Water Board's California Water Code, Clean Water Act, and then of course, Fish and Game Code. And so we're looking at all of those pieces. And of course, we're looking at, just the interest from stakeholders and tribal members and all these influences, right? So we have to be sort of cognizant of all of those influences, all of those demands, and yet try to create an industry that's sustainable. And more recently, I would say since 2018, the onset of Governor Brown's Forest Management Task Force, which Governor Newsom renamed under Senate Bill 456, Wildfire Enforcement Task Force. We also have to take into account wildfire resiliency, right? And forest practice does to some degree, take part in that. It has a role. So next slide. So I just want to quickly talk about some of the data that I was speaking to a little bit earlier. So over the last 5 years, 50% of THP submissions assessed are confirmed to be in conformance with the forest practice rules within 75 days. This is just sort of the foundation of information based on mining and cow trees. 37% of THP submissions are returned for insufficiency after initial CAL FIRE review. Again, that's just an opportunity for two things. One, we'll talk about metrics in a little while. What should that number be? And are there opportunities for us to make some tweaks to drive to that number? Benefits to both the industry side, the stakeholder side, and the agency side. Less than 50% of timber harvest activities begin within 150 days of THP submittal. It's a CEQA equivalent process. If you look at how much time it takes for a standard EIR to move through, that's pretty fast. But nonetheless, again, opportunities. Less than 70% of planned submitter requests for adjacent permits, adjacent meaning subsequent permits after CAL FIRE certification. There's typically a request for a water board permit and a Department of Fish and Wildlife permit. Are received within 30 days of CAL FIRE's notice of conformance. So you get that certification, that notice. About 70% of planned submitters then request those subsequent permits from water boards and Department of Fish and Wildlife. 95% of the water board's permits are issued within 30 days of that request, and 86% draft LSAs are issued within 30 days of that request. It kind of gives you a sense of the timeframes that we're working with the agencies. Next slide. So the objective program information, CAL FIRE THP process documentation is maintained and accessible as part of the published forest practice rules. There's evidence of periodic ongoing review for sufficiency that wasn't consistently observed, right? Again, the whole purpose of Lean Six and Sigma is to create that consistency. Uncertainty causes frustration, right? So where can we find opportunities to create consistency? Agency training on the THP process is available. We do that, I would say fairly regularly, but not regularly enough. And I don't know that it's targeted toward new THP or timber staff at the water boards. Those are opportunities. Industry training, again, we talked about that. Again, another opportunity for us to work with Cal Forest and other industry representatives to potentially create some annual training modules that both industry and agency staff and stakeholders can benefit from. So summary of the NIBAC recommendations. I'm going to introduce Cheryl. Mm-hmm. Are you ready, Cheryl?
Yeah.
Joe Griffiths with the California Geological Survey. Turn it over to you.
Thank you, Clint. All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Cheryl Griffith, and I am a senior engineering geologist with the California Geological Survey's Forest and Watershed Geology Program. And I have been involved with timber harvest plan reviews since 2010, so for quite a while now.
Cheryl, could you speak just a little higher?
Oh, okay.
Just so people don't have to scream.
Yeah. So I will be spending the next bit of time with you all going through the recommendations that NIBAC put forth. One thing to note about the recommendations being presented next is that they don't exactly line up with the recommendations in the report. We've consolidated and summarized these into logical or similar categories. So the numbering here shown doesn't necessarily correlate to how they're presented in the NIBAC report. Leadership has absorbed these recommendations, reorganized them into more clear, concise summaries, and is bringing them forward today as its own set of recommendations. We aim to fulfill pending input from you all as to priorities and other dimensions we should consider. These reflect action we're prepared to take. All right, so as we stepped through these recommendations, we'd like you to be thinking about these questions and take some notes on your thoughts and observations for our discussion after. All right, recommendation number 1, clarify and align roles, responsibilities, and procedures to better manage expectations. The report repeatedly highlights a lack of clarity around who is responsible for what and general expectations as to process across agencies, tribes, plan submitters, and other stakeholders, which creates frustration with the process and can slow work down. Action here can improve predictability and reduce delays. Incorporating professional communications teams, enhancing and improving guidance documents, web content improvements. These can be among the actions that we take to mitigate the issues detected. Recommendation number 2, improve communication, notification practices, and information flow. Stakeholders described communication as inconsistent, reactive, and lacking clear protocols. Process, workflow, and responsibilities are confusing to stakeholders. Tribal and public comment process needs improvement to better demonstrate how comments on THPs are being addressed and incorporated. This recommendation is to take action to improve experiences with THP review, process and comment process, improve plain language communications, and user-friendly summaries. The assessment recommends creating a comprehensive communication framework, improving standardization of communication around notification timelines and responsibilities, and improving comment period management, particularly for tribes and public stakeholders. Recommendation number 3, redesign and standardize communications to provide clarity to the THP workflow. Stakeholders describe the THP process as complex, inconsistent, and prone to rework. The assessment calls for a clean sheet redesign of content requirements, improved workflow standardization, risk-based tailoring, and clear submission protocols to reduce variation, confusion, and rejection rates. We view this as a communication problem above all. We can reevaluate the effectiveness of our current stakeholder support models, particularly in areas of plan submission and general review process support. The benefits of standardization can improve user experience, reduce administrative burden, and enhance transparency and regulatory effectiveness. Actions we can take are to thoroughly evaluate existing web content, guidance documents, or other existing tools to ensure they are updated accurately, or that they are updated to accurately reflect existing requirements. So in the near term, some actions we can take are to revise checklists and guidance documents after annual rule change updates and publish them on relevant websites and via RPF channels to alert practitioners of the changes. An example of where we are already working towards this includes the cumulative impact assessment guidelines that CAL FIRE developed with input from CFA and CLFA. Recommendation number 4, embed continuous improvement in change management. The assessment highlights that the THP process has evolved piecemeal over decades without coordinated reevaluation in recent years. Sustained management of change in documenting and communicating updates is recommended to ensure long-term alignment between processes, technology, statutory changes, and stakeholder needs. Benefits of continuous improvement are that it promotes accountability and operational resilience. Every year, CAL FIRE works with a board to create an online and printed version of the latest forest practice rules. Forms are revised to make sure they include any new regulation language. A new RM71 completion and stocking form is being developed to avoid confusion from the regulated public, and we can and will do more to improve comprehension of change as it arises toward reducing waste of staff time, plan submitter time, and that of stakeholders. Recommendation number 5, Align THP process with adjacent permitting systems, permit synchronization. Stakeholders often experience the THP process and subsequent CDFW water boards permitting as a single continuum. They are often indistinguishable to our stakeholder process-wise. The report recommends evaluating end-to-end THP review and permitting interdependencies to reduce duplication, confusion, delays, and misaligned expectations. Identifying system gaps will help inform potential redesign of workflows to minimize delays and streamline the process. This links to recommendation number 8 coming up regarding technology updates. While analyzed water boards and CDFW statistics revealed a minority of projects suffer from delays in obtaining follow-on permits, we seek to improve performance and alleviate the concern. With streamlining and synchronization, aligned processes reduces duplication, improves coordination, and enhances clarity of roles and timelines. Benefits to the applicants are that improved alignment decreases burden on plan submitters and increases overall regulatory efficiency. Recommendation number 6, strengthen state agency workforce capacity, training, and succession planning. This includes workforce planning, enhancing and standardizing training programs, succession and retention planning, and investing in staff. There are workforce challenges, however. Aging RPF demographics, onboarding inconsistency, skill gaps, and staffing vacancies were among the most widely expressed pain points. The report recommends developing comprehensive cross-agency workforce plans, creating consistent onboarding and refresher training, and establishing more consistent, scalable standards across units and regions. Recommendation number 7, strengthen industrial and non-industrial operator capacity and training. The regulatory environment we're operating in is always changing, and we need to ensure plan submitters have current understanding of applicable changes to reduce THP returns and improve process efficiency. Informing plan submitters of changes and/or means to address common pitfalls in plan submission will reduce time spent in THP review by all parties. Efforts to achieve this can include industry training and more engagement with small and non-industrial landowners to improve their understanding of available permit pathways. With regard to small landowners, progress to date includes legislative and rule change action to enable sustainable timber harvest on private lands, such as the forest resilience exemption. Work has been done in this area, and we need to ensure folks know their options and existing pathways available to them today. Mm-hmm. And we're always open to hearing other opinions and ideas in this area to help out the landowners. Mm-hmm. Recommendation number 8, modernize technology and establish reliable data architecture. Mm-hmm. This is an area noted that needs improvement. CalTrees and related technology systems are widely viewed as cumbersome, inconsistent, or unreliable. Recommended actions include re-examining existing cross-agency data architecture and potentially redesigning technology workflows, standardizing templates and mapping, prioritizing system updates, and improving mobile capabilities for field staff. The goal is scalable, reliable infrastructure. Building scalable infrastructure increases usability, reduces delays, and supports long-term regulatory and operational needs. Actions suggested are to perform a CalTrees gap analysis of needs and current performance and create a future vision that documents solution potential. To establish and enforce standards for THP template use and submission, including refreshed standards for inclusion of maps and other technical reference materials submitted with the THP. CAL FIRE has noted that they're considering creating a data dictionary to help users locate harvest documents. Since migrating CalTrees to the cloud, the system is now on the latest Acela version, eliminating delays from its on-premise updates. Cloud support resolves system issues within hours instead of days, and the overall speed and performance for reports, searches, and workflows has significantly improved. Recommendation number 9, improve performance metrics, transparency, and shared outcomes. This is an area noted for needing improvement. Stakeholders felt tracking of metrics of success in the THP process doesn't fully reflect shared priorities. The report calls for evaluating and redefining performance goals and creating metrics that reflect environmental, cultural, economic, and efficiency objectives, and improving reporting transparency. Actions can be to establish shared outcomes. Enhancing and defining shared success criteria fosters collaboration, aligns efforts, and improves program confidence and accountability. Establishing clearly articulated goals and metrics can allow agency personnel and stakeholders to determine whether the THP submittal and review process is meeting expectations. All right, beyond the Lean Six Sigma recommendations. So we have 2 additional recommendations the leadership team suggests on the following slides. These were born out of the Lean Six Sigma process and what we learned along the way as we supported this process. We decided these merited their own recommendations, though they were not explicitly defined in the Lean Six Sigma report and recommendations. All right, additional recommendation number 10. Improve communication and information dissemination. Improve leadership, accessibility, and responsiveness. Evaluate the need for expanded opportunities for leadership team to engage tribes, regulated public, and the public on program operations, including listening sessions, roundtables, or consultations, workshops, and purpose-driven working groups. We know our stakeholders desire more forums and opportunities to voice concerns and thoughts on the THP process and broader activities of AB 1492 program in working with the leadership team. We have provided this recommendation as a means to enhance access and transparency as to program operations for all our stakeholders. And finally, additional recommendation 11, improve tribal representation in decision-making. Better address tribal concerns in THP review process. Clarify and better communicate existing and available pathways and mechanisms for tribes to opt into THP review process in working with review team agencies. As needed and resources allow, establish roundtables and consultations to better understand points of disconnect or confusion. We learned that there is an ongoing disconnect for many tribes when it comes to engaging the THP process in a government-to-government context. It became clear in discussions with various tribes that there is a lack of awareness as to existing rules and policies available to tribes to engage in the THP process. Leadership team intends to scope this further with tribes and better understand the issue areas, and identify pathways for tribes to better access and engage. I will now turn it back over to Clint to wrap up our recommendation segment. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. Next slide. This is a summary slide. There's a couple of points I want to make before diving into this. One, the whole point of trying to create some additional effectiveness and efficiencies in the program is it gives us more, to do a lot of the value added things that we really like to be able to do in the program. But as we're thinking about responding to these recommendations and soliciting your input, I hope that there's at least some consideration, and we'd really appreciate some thoughts from you as to some of those value added components. And I think that applies to industry as well as their stakeholders that are participating today. Some key points I do want to make. One is that this is a big lift, right? When we consider the recommendations that Cheryl summarized, there are core 12 recommendations included in the report. We spent some time summarizing these. When you actually look at the plain language of the recommendations that are included in the report, there are a few of them that are maybe a little more challenging to try to get your head wrapped around. A lot of that's just because of the language, the vocabulary that's used in a common Lean Six Sigma analysis. So it really was a summary. There are plenty of opportunities for us to, work with any of you on the specific language included. And when we get to implementation, we'll be referring back to the plain language of the recommendations to ensure that we're incorporating the intent of the recommendation that was summarized here into whatever it is that we developed. time allows is an important part. Every one of these folks up here have full-time jobs. That's the reality of it. Assembly Bill 1492 didn't carve out and pay for executive level participation to build out the program. That's just the reality of legislation. That's the reality of government. We are fortunate that we've had the continuity of this team for as long as we have. They've gotten to the point where it doesn't matter if they're a water board person, they have a pretty good understanding of what the CAL FIRE roles, responsibilities, obligations are. Likewise with CAL FIRE and Department of Fish and Wildlife and CGS. CNRA has been an amazing partner in leading this effort along with CalEPA. Really, really fortunate. We would not be to this particular point if we didn't have the continuity of this team up here. So I just want to state that. But nonetheless, there are still real-time constraints that we'll have to take into account. And part of what we're hoping to get from you is an idea with regard to the prioritization of these activities. Which ones matter most to you, which ones can provide, the biggest bang for the buck based on the level of effort that's required to implement them. Because at the end of the day, we're going to take these comments back. As I said earlier on, we're going to create a menu of things that are currently on our plate, try to wrap that into a 5-year work plan that will include more regular participation with you, whether that's a biannual, maybe that's paired with the annual legislative report. We'll figure out what those timelines are, but nonetheless, it is our intent to provide more regular and more frequent interaction with stakeholders so that you have an opportunity to engage in the implementation of many of these recommendations. That said, there are some recommendations that I think the 1482 leadership team can just kind of take on and potentially just present to you as a draft for comment. Other ones are going to require much more interaction and with regard to implementation plans and the design of whatever it is that we come up with to address these particular recommendations. So with that, here are some rough timeframes that we put together to kind of pair with the recommendations, just to give you a sense of what we're thinking. Clarified roles, responsibilities, and expectations. There are actually 3 recommendations in the report that kind of get to this topic. One of them is pretty straightforward. We can probably complete that in less than a year. Other ones are going to require a little bit more effort and a commitment to, sort of annual long-term maintenance once the particular recommendation is completed. I don't want to walk through all of these, but the column on the right really is to try to give you a sense of level of effort and the amount of time it will take to implement that recommendation, not from today forward, but when we get to it, it's going to take about that much time to complete is our estimate. So
you have 3 main recommendations that are part of or separate from. There's 3 ways of delving into it that you're describing, you mentioned.
I think it's the green one.
Well, so I just used that one for an example. The first one, clarified roles, responsibilities, and expectations. So if you look at the Lean 6 report, there are 3 recommendations in there that kind of get to that point. The first one is just to, create a really clear and transparent workflow that describes the requirements that are laid out in the forest practice rules, right? So that industry has a very clear understanding of what that process looks like in the timeframes. Stakeholders have a very clear understanding of what point in that process they'll have an opportunity to engage, what that engagement looks like. It is a notification by CAL FIRE or the water boards or the Department of Fish and Wildlife, et cetera. That's a fairly easy one to do, right? We've already got parts of that. CAL FIRE spent quite a bit of time and effort putting together a really nice checklist as a result of the task force in 2889. I think that serves as a pretty good framework and a baseline for us to build on.
Where is that?
The THP checklist, we can send you the link.
Task Force 2889.
No, so there was an Assembly Bill 2889
Okay.
that sort of got to timber harvest planning guidelines. And then there was a Wildfire and Forest Resilience Task Force key action item that also requested the 1492 leadership team, which was primarily CAL FIRE, to develop a timber harvest guidance document. And so a lot of these things sort of build on previous efforts. My point is that the work that they've already done is fantastic, and it'll serve, I think, as a really good baseline for us to just expand on that, for instance, stakeholder engagement opportunities, right? That's just my point there. Other ones require a little bit more time and energy to make sure that potentially our web based materials, any documents that we've produced are updated to reflect any changes to the forest practice rules and things like that. That requires a little bit more effort, potentially some attorneys, and then of course, long-term maintenance to make sure that those documents, those web materials remain up to date. But that's just one example. This kind of gives you a sense though, when we're walking through the recommendations and the leadership team, they're over there taking notes. When you're speaking and providing comment on the recommendations, this will give you a sense of the timeframes that we're really looking at. Our hope, though, is that within 5 years we can check all of these off the list.
But you mentioned three. Well, it's not clear whether the three things that seem to be a priority you thought needed to be a priority. And you mentioned the first one is clarifying the roles in the workforce.
Yeah, the colors are only there to try to relay level of difficulty, right? So the green ones, you'll see they're all less than 1 year.
So
We think the green one.
those are the three that you said we're to pay attention to right now.
No, I hope that wasn't my intent.
Oh.
So the green just means that those are relatively easy. In our opinion, we feel like, we can probably tackle those within a year. Once we start, the orange ones, are more challenging, right? They're 2+ years, is our estimate on how long it would take to build each one of those out once we start. So our hope is that based on the comments we received today from all of you, the feedback we received from you, that'll help us prioritize which ones we start when. Our hope is that, in the next month or so, a couple of months, we'll be able to build a 5-year work plan for the AB 1492 leadership team that includes all of the recommendations that are embedded in that NIVAC report, in addition to the Wildfire Forest Resilience Action Plan, right? They're coming out with a revised action plan under Senate Bill 456. It's required to be revised every 5 years. They're in the process of revising that. That will undoubtedly include additional, key action items that the 1492 leadership team will need to address. So at the end of the day, all of these recommendations, in addition to all of our other work, we'll sit down, we'll compile that all into a 5-year work plan that'll be available for everyone to have an understanding of what it is we're working on when there are opportunities for all of you, industry or otherwise, to participate in the development and implementation of those recommendations. That's our hope.
Okay, so how does SB 456 fit into what you just described?
It's just 456 essentially made the Wildfire Forest Resilience Task Force a permanent thing until 2048, right?
Okay.
And as part of 456 and making the task force a formal thing until 2048, it also required the task force to produce a Wildfire Forest Resilience Action Plan and revise it every 5 years until 2048. My point was just that every time that action plan is revised, it will likely include responsibilities for the AB 1492 leadership team to develop, to implement, to engage in. And we have to balance that work with this work and some of the other things that are on our plate. And that's kind of the intent behind that 5-year work plan, is to let's gather all that up. Let's put together a nice work plan so that everyone has an understanding of what it is we're doing, when, and what have you. Does that help?
That's good. One of the things, the original task force was more ridgetop to ripple, so to speak. And because of the catastrophic fires, so much of the energy, most of the forestry people and you all is fire, 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 and fire. And That's just, I think, a fact. And whether or not it's it may need some consideration of broadening things out.
Thank you. So
I
have you wrapped up on your part, Clint?
Yeah, I think we're done with this slide. I don't know if we want to go to a break now or.
Yeah, I was gonna kind of
Okay.
thank you so much, Clint. And thank you, Cheryl, for your presentation. And so I wanted to allow a few minutes for clarifying questions. So not comments, but clarifying questions on the slides you heard today. So for folks online and in the room, if there's just something that didn't ring true or should I say wasn't clear to you, we can revisit the slide. But we are gonna then take a break for 15 minutes. So everyone has a moment to collect their thoughts, take a moment to get water, what have you. And then we'll get into actual comments where you will definitely have time to provide your viewpoints, whatever they may be as to what we discussed today. Any clarifying comments online
just have a question.
or in the room? Yeah, sure.
No, I thought, I thought YG came in, I believe. Right. I thought at a certain point in time, that the water quality and the fishing game, I thought that they were supposed to not be after the plan is approved, but they were supposed to be part of the plan approval because the CEQA equivalency is, the THP is supposed to, those other agencies are supposed to be using that, right? For the CEQA compliance. So I thought at some point in time, it was, and the question is, was that true? Were the, Elliot might have a notion on it because it was a big.
That's a clarifying question about the slides though. That's kind of where we're at right now is.
Well, it is. That was a big deal. That is an issue.
Well, secret compliance is not mentioned in any of them.
It's implied. Because
It's implied,
that is
okay,
what we
but
do,
there are
yeah.
elements
Mhm.
of what's suggested that relate to secret compliance that actually aren't resolved, including in relationship to your mission. We can talk about that later, but those are outstanding questions. You mentioned mission to restore and sustain,
Mhm.
restore and recover as the access, but you mentioned sustainability, but it all relates to this and we're not dealing with that at the moment.
Okay, you're asking to clarify, are we dealing with CEQA compliance as a part of this discussion and our mission? And
Yeah, apparently this didn't look at secret compliance, actually. I don't see anything.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay, the Lean Six assessment that was
Yeah,
undertaken. I
right.
see. Yeah. So the scope of the Lean Six assessment was looking at the process and workflow, the roles and responsibilities of the parties, their experience engaging the process, whether it's agency personnel, tribes, timber industry, small landowners, NGOs, interested public, and looking at just all of that, all of the web of interactions that are happening, all of the steps that are taken in the process, looking at waste and unnecessary waiting and anything that could be delaying action and wasting everyone's time, frankly, and preventing value-added work from happening and quality outcomes. And so we looked at the quality of the review in the context of how comments are taken in and incorporated, how people are approaching our process, how plan submitters are experiencing the process, how agency personnel are experiencing the process, and where can we improve that? So that is the focus of this, not so much going down a particular thread on CEQA and its like CEQA compliance in the depths that maybe I think you're talking about. And it doesn't preclude future conversations on that, but we're looking at really just our process for THP review.
Well,
I don't know if anyone else understands.
secret compliance is a complication
Right.
that everybody has to deal with. If you don't have to deal with it on ministerial plan, which are 3/4 of what's going on, but you have to deal with it in this context.
Mhm.
And I think that's a flaw here. And I'm going to ask John Bramley to talk about what it's really like to get a plan done.
Okay, yeah. So, thank you for that. Okay, let me just make sure there's not any in the room clarification, because we will have time for comment, but any clarifications? Yes.
Honestly, it's a clarifying question. This slide back here, we talk about defining the
Measuring.
problem.
Mhm.
What is the problem that we were actually looking at?
Sorry,
What is the scope
do you
of
want to
the
go back to
problem?
that slide?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to be clear in my own mind, 'cause I don't have the NIBAC report in front of me right now. Is the problem that the timber harvest plan review process could be more efficient from a paperwork perspective? Is that sort of the definition of the problem for purposes of the discussion?
The reason that we undertook this is to see what the problems could be with our process deeper than 10 years in on running this program. And the THP process didn't start in 2012, but the program and the way we're structured and the way we're operating, formally, the way we kind of reorganized ourselves after 2012 and how we've been operating in, the past 13, 14 years under this program, we wanted to take another look at what is the problem? Is there a problem? What are the distinctions under the hood that, people want to surface with us about how this is operating, how the THP plan review process is functioning from the viewpoints of all of our diverse stakeholders that are engaged here. So we didn't come in with any preconceived notions. We had a third-party consultant assess it from the outside, talk to all of these parties to just listening sessions. What is it that you are troubled by, if anything, with the process, what have you? And that's kind of what this process methodically delves into, is hearing from people, doing research on the data available, on the actual technical, when does a THP get approved, how fast, what's the workflow, what are the kind of touch points and sort of baton passes and all of that that's happening.
That answer those, if the define, stating the problem is not something that was sort of handed to the consultants, that here's the problem we want you to look at. In this case, it was, here's a process we really need a third party to look at and tell us what's the problem.
Exactly.
Yeah, and Paul, in the report itself, I think they're sort of identified as pain points and they're discussed. And in our slides, we had a couple on stakeholder reported challenges, which are kind of what surfaced from their interviews and surveys with folks, and that they summarized.
Okay, that's helpful. I didn't know if I had missed something in terms of where at the beginning of the contract, there was a stated problem to be assessed. Here, like it was sort of proactively here's what we want you to drill down on, as opposed to a more wide open blue sky, like what's the problem here, other than the anecdotes that we hear from different stakeholders and stuff, like objectively with some sort of analysis behind it, what's the problem here that could be better?
Yeah.
So that's
I know there's one in the room and we're gonna get you in a moment, but I just want to check in.
Yeah, one card.
But no, we'll do the first hand here and then go to online. Sorry, just checking in if there's anything.
Sorry.
Yeah.
That kind of was what I was wondering too, because there's a couple of findings that it appears to just a kind of a lay person from the public, which I am. These aren't problems, like the concerns that were expressed from the stakeholders who we don't have a window into, that we know how you describe them, but we don't really have a breakdown of which stakeholders came from where and what their complaints were or their observations. But when you get to the analysis, it looks like some of those problems weren't actually found to be problems. Case in point, the permitting issue post approval, right? I know a lot of industry folks think this is a huge problem and are even trying to sponsor a bill in the legislature to address it and set timeframes for it. But you found in the Lean Six Sigma analysis that it's not really the significant delay that it's being portrayed as. So my question is similar to Paul's. Are we going to move forward with recommendations based on non-problems?
Yeah, so I'd say this, that there's data and analysis and numbers, and then there's the reported challenges that we consulted. And we got a sense of just what everybody thinks, the perceptions, the reality, where those diverge. That's certainly a point. But it is a perception that we are hearing, and we want to make sure that we address that with appropriate resources and time given to it, to the degree we can, in the mix of all the other, not isolating that issue. But all of this is to say, we're considering all of this. We think it merits investigation. Where it sits in the list of priorities and how quickly it'll be tackled, that's something that we want to hear back from all of you about and people online. And so that's all to be determined, but it's on the radar, it's on the map, and how it's prioritized is really the question. And your views can be whatever they are today about any of the recommendations or what we missed or, what have you. But I think I answered that hopefully for now. But I want to check in on the online team.
Yeah, there's a clarifying question. Is the Board of Forestry involved in all? And I take that to mean that the Board of Forestry part of the leadership team.
Yes, so Jane, who's in the room here, Jane sits on the leadership team with us. Tony Anderson also is party to this group, but Jane often attends our leadership engagements. And so yes, Board of Forestry is involved, and we also have been routinely checking in with the Board of Forestry as this work has progressed. So we had our March presentation. We intend, and we'll talk about this later, but we have a next step that we're going to take sort of your collective feedback today into consideration as we then go back to the board and kind of have a whole workshop around this with them, or a discussion, I should say, at the Forest Practice Committee meeting. So they're very much involved and tuned in, and some of this may ultimately, some pieces of the solution, that the steps that we take will involve Board of Forestry decision-making and authorities that are beyond what we can control, and that will kind of surface through this. Is there anyone else? Okay.
Good.
And then we're going to take a break in just a couple minutes.
Okay. But isn't it true that, I think that both you all and NIVAC think there's some internal things involving technology that are a really important part of the effectiveness and efficiency? Isn't that something that it seems to be, I think, you said, or maybe somebody said technology is a very important aspect of efficiency and effectiveness.
That's right, yeah. Data and technology and the way, plan submissions with the data submissions and how they're submitted are in the mix of issues we're looking at. We're also looking at the technology platforms we're using for review team interactions, for plan submitters, and the CalTree system is our technology for online submissions.
But they're seen as a threat to a lot of people.
Well, what's the question, I guess?
Between the board and the industry, there is mammoth pushback on the kind of smooth, I'm trying to couch it as a question. Is that a problem?
All right, folks, we're gonna get started. Sorry, I yelled into the.
That was perfect.
Yelled at the people online. Sorry about that. All right, we're back. I just for those that maybe showed up a little bit late to the meeting, I do want to remind about our agenda for a second so that you know where we're at in this meeting. So we are at the point where we're going to start taking public comment, specifically public comment from folks about the recommendations we stepped through today. So that's the focus. And sorry, there's like kind of side chats if we could keep.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. So our focus is to take comment right now, and then depending on the level of interest and the comments coming in the room and online, we will gauge if we need to go past noon, or if we can wrap up. We'll see. We'll just see how it goes. Right now, we have the intention to take your comments, allowing 3 minutes per person. And then should we get through all of the comments in the room, we can always come back around to you. So please know we are enforcing a strict 3-minute limit with a timer. You will see the timer. And you do need to be, wrapped up by your 3-minute mark. And then we will come around to you as time permits. Just depends on how this all goes. We just don't know the level of comments that we're expecting. So that is one thing. Also, when you speak, please do introduce yourself, your name and your affiliation, so that, if you have an affiliation, it would be good just so people know who they're hearing in the room. It's very helpful to people. And then if comments continue until noon, we will take a lunch break at noon sharp, and we will reconvene at 1 p.m. and go through additional comment as needed, and then have a next steps wrap up. So I think those are the key parameters. So we have our timer, and I'd like to really remind everyone we're here to focus on the Lean Six report recommendations, those additional recommendations we offered there at the end, recommendations in 11 and 12, which we can go back on the slides if needed, if necessary, to show people something. But anyway, so those are the focus of the discussion, and consider the prompting words on the screen here. How do these recommendations align with your priorities? Where should our leadership team prioritize? Or where do you want us to emphasize? What recommendation seems to you to have the highest impact? What is missing from the recommendations that you don't think was articulated well enough or at all that you want to surface? So that would be the focus. And remember, this is all about process, workflow, how we're working together, how we're reviewing THPs, how we're incorporating comment, the whole workflow process chain, all of that is what we're talking about today. With that, let's open up the room to speakers. And again, name, affiliation, and please try to project your voice in the room for folks online. Thank you. Who would like to start us off? Anyone online?
Yeah, do you want to take?
Sure, we'll take someone online. No hands are up yet here.
Corona was the first to raise his hand, and I'm allowing you to speak.
Have they unmuted themselves?
Andy, you need to unmute yourself.
Folks on Zoom, you need to unmute yourself once you've been told you're unmuted. Andy, what was their name? Maybe he didn't hear you.
Corona.
Kalota. Andy, can you hear us? Have they unmuted themselves? Or?
Yeah, how's that?
Oh, there we go. Excellent.
Okay. So you got my name, former commercial fisher. Can't do it anymore. So, but I'm still a sport and subsistence fisher, and I also worked in the woods for years, chainsaw, the whole bit, and I've been involved with the THP process a lot, and herbicide use in forestry way back when it was really problematic, and helped to replace it with hand crews doing thinning at the same time we were doing release from brush competition, plantation release, as it were. And I'm confused because I have a lot of questions here. This whole NIVAC Lean Six Sigma evaluation framework seems to me on the surface to be a duplication of effort that's already been underway, such as the adaptive management formula that everyone's been kicking around, where you assess a problem, design a way to address it, understand it better, implement what you design, monitor it, and evaluate it, and recommend adjustments to continue evolving. And then it repeats itself, so that once you do implement the adjustment, then you do another assessment of it over time. And that's how we learn and evaluate and improve everything that we've done, from medicine to space exploration, whatever. You feed on what you know. So to me, the original 1492 Act was a complete system where they're evaluating the effectiveness of the existing rules through the THP process by using LIDAR, mining THPs that are already on record, using a GIS and a cumulative impact analysis to determine whether things work the way they were planned and the net effects of those and what we can do to address that. Now you come up with another whole set of a formula that I still go, what's Sigma in this? I don't understand. I've got the Sustained Groundwater Management Act and now another Sigma thing and an evaluation framework. You guys spoke so quickly this morning that, I mean, I'm 83, but my ears weren't able to pick up on the stuff that you was trying to sandwich in a really quick way in your presentations, one after another, and with relatively complex word salads, it seemed to me after a while, that really didn't add up to what I'm used to dealing with. It seems to me that final report that was produced by the group that put the California Natural Resources Agency, where they had the pilot study. I can't remember the name of it right now. And they really learned a lot from that. And they had page 70, a whole evaluation of next steps that needed to happen. what worked, what didn't work, what they need to do. And we were recommending more study areas such as Elk River drainage, Scott Shasta drainages, other places like that, where there's been a lot of impacts and a lot of failures over time because the process hasn't worked. And people are trying to get the timber out before they realize what they're doing and the net effect of that on the landform, cumulative impacts, all that. So we need to get a handle on that. I think we need to implement the final report recommendations of the 1492. Go back to what was originally intended and skip this whole thing and start over again. Cumulative impact analysis, cumulative watershed effects will take us where we need to go. Thanks.
Thank you very much, and right on time. Thank you for your comment. Very much appreciated. Anyone in the room or online?
Yeah, I'll go.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Name and affiliation.
Al Levine for Coast Action Group. Well, first, you started everything off by saying sustainable, which aligns with recover and protect in the Forest Practice Act. You haven't defined what sustainable is, and we can talk about that later. But getting to Lean Sigma 6, I don't think they actually went through timber plans and realized how complex they are. They are very complex entities, and the agencies work really hard to get things done for both their mission and the applicant, and they're not getting the support. There needs to be more staff for all of them. And let's go for one issue, 37% return. I thought it was 34.5. That's up from 22 in 2000. And I look at a lot of plans and I understand how complex they are, but there's no necessity, even with that complexity, for the returns. And I just looked at one return for 30 just reasons. Couldn't saying water course crossing is going to be here, and then in another place we're not doing that, and or there's no fish, and the previous plan 20 years earlier said there were fish. There are fish. A lot of mistakes are done, but the complexity lends to problematic issues that sometimes extend a plan approval period. And Lean Sigma dismissed the whole thing. They did not dive in other to say what anybody would say if they were dealing with a business situation, which happened to me in my former life. This is how you fix workflow in business. And that's what they were looking at. And they weren't looking at the timber issue. Actually, they support more staffing when in the successor team and work flow resilience.
No.
Elliot, is there?
Sorry.
Okay, sorry, excuse us.
They're saying that you need to have more people out in the field supporting what's done out there, and in the shops supporting getting the permitting done and accurate review so they can actually look at things. And THBs are actually 1/4 or less than, there's 2 million acres going down in exemptions every year on average. And of them, I would say there's a fair amount of plants that should be looked at. So I'm done for the moment.
Okay, absolutely. Thank you for your comment. And we can absolutely come back around to you.
Yeah, so I'm going to ask you to give CAL FIRE a chance to show what complexities are there and why things don't happen lickety split, like what eats up staff time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone in the room or online right now? Is there, just speak up if there is someone. Yeah.
Kimberly Burr
You need to speak up, Elliot, too.
Yeah.
Elliot.
Kimberly. And you're unmuted.
Yes,
What have they done? What is?
Turn off your speaker. She needs to turn off her speaker.
Oh, turn off your speakers. We're hearing a,
Reverb.
we're hearing a return. Yeah.
And then you'll need to unmute again.
And then unmute yourself.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Much better.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, this is Kimberly Burr. I'm down on the Russian River near Green Valley Creek, and we have a lot of timber in our county, and I'm familiar with THP review. I was reviewing your document, and some of the things that jumped out at me that might facilitate, better review for both the public and for the industry is that we need to have better definitions. Like Alan was saying, if you could define, what is significant, what is substantial impact, what is insignificant, because these are words in the process that if foresters have to spend, lots and lots and lots and lots of words on to try to explain. And I think that it'd be very beneficial to have quantitative requirements. So it can be much, much cleaner and more streamlined if the rules could reflect some sort of quantitative analysis, more science. And my other thing is we have to move the process into the 21st century. I really appreciate the fact that, there's talk about making this a lot more, I don't know what you would call it, electronic, train people so they can submit their THPs online and be confident in that, but then not at the expense of real information, real timely information, and to make sure that CAL FIRE standards are realistic in our current environment and the current context in which logging is occurring, and the current status of our watersheds and what how they're not recovering, they're continuing to be logged. And so that to me is a flaw somewhere in the rules that has not been addressed. And, maybe the industry has some ideas about how to deal with that. How do you continue logging in an sediment impaired watershed? Maybe it comes down to, giving the watersheds more time, and that is kind of a modernization of the rules. And I think that they can really stand some modernization to deal with our current planetary problems and into the future. So those would be kind of my presenting comments at this time. And I appreciate that you guys are going through this process. And the goal here is, good outcomes. And it's not just speeding everything up. Good outcomes require that these watersheds are protected just as much as the timber, is protected. And there needs to be a better balance, in my humble opinion. And maybe this process can work towards that better balance. And there's one last thing I was going to say. I can't remember what it was, but I do appreciate you guys doing this, and we'll probably make more comments later. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your comment. You're absolutely welcome to comment again in a little bit. All right, mute that one. And
I
then,
could have an opinion.
huh?
I could probably find an opinion if.
Yeah, well, we have, and Elliot, just let us know when you have hands. Go ahead.
Thanks. Paul Mason with Pacific Forest Trust. I guess a couple of things. First, this has been a helpful summary and much more accessible, much more useful than the report itself. So thank you for that. And particularly when Cheryl was walking through the recommendations and then adding some additional commentary, if you could just, tidy that up into like a, half dozen page summary of like, here's what we're looking at for recommendations, along with sort of the additional verbal description that you gave, that would be a really helpful way for us to have something concrete to react to after this meeting. So that'd be really helpful follow-up. I think in general, what is being recommended here makes a ton of sense. There's no point in having an inefficient process. And there's definitely ways that we have an inefficient process right now for a variety of reasons. I've spent a lot of time in budget committees lately, where we are fighting over whether, last year the administration spoke 6,000 positions from environmental agencies, and this year we're fighting over trying to restore about 10 or 11% of those to the water board and Fish and Wildlife and basically all the review agencies except for CAL FIRE. And at the same time, we've got half a dozen people at CAL FIRE sitting around digitizing maps that were created digitally and then made into paper and then sent to CAL FIRE to be re-digitized. It's a stunning waste of resources. And so I think that there are a range of ways that we can both make the process work better and free up staff time to use in other ways. I mean, those are positions that are funded from the timber regulation and forest restoration account that could be going to staff at the water board or DFW or at CAL FIRE or in any of the other ways that I know we need more staff capacity. So in general, I think this is, good stuff in the right direction. It'll be helpful to get for a consolidated list with a little bit of detail, but more accessible than the full report to give you some additional recommendations. The other thing, though, that really just jumps out is this is just focused on how do we process the existing system with the existing outcomes more efficiently. But the existing system and the existing outcomes are to a very large extent why we have a forest health and fire crisis on the landscape today. And we're out there spending hundreds of millions of dollars of state money to try and reduce fire risk. At the same time, the forested landscape for the last half century or more has been governed by the forest practice rules, and that's created the context that we're dealing with. So this is all well and good, but it leaves the 800-pound gorilla of sort of like, how do we actually have a process that aligns with our broader state goals of a fire resilient landscape where we have functional watersheds and the broader state values while still having a functional timber industry? I mean, this is a deeply complicated question of how to make this financially sustainable and functional, but that's a broader question that needs to happen somewhere and somewhere soon.
Can be done.
Thank you, Paul, for your comments. Very appreciated. And certainly we'll come back around if you have more to say. As anything online? Okay.
If I could follow with Paul,
Sure.
I really appreciate those comments. I sort of here today wearing one hat. My full-time job is, as I said earlier, managing the Reading office of the water board, and within the Central Valley Water Board, we have 19 program areas, right? Everything from forestry to oil fields and everything in between. The recommendations that NIBAC, developed, I don't think were sort of a real surprise to us. And at least from my perspective, I think we could apply a lot of those recommendations to just about any one of our 19 programs at the Central Valley Water Board and within a number of different agencies, right?
Yeah.
It's sort of this idea that, legislation is passed that requires the agency staff, to develop new programs or implement, particular components. In my experience, it takes about 8 to 10 years to stand up a new program. That's generally the timeline it takes, even within, a single agency. Here, there's multiple agencies, multiple boards. There's the Board of Forestry, there's the state and regional water quality control boards, and there's the Fish and Game Commission, right? All of those entities are manned, women by persons who are appointed by the governor, confirmed by the Senate, right? They all have specific rules and rulemaking bodies and all those things. All of that has to be taken into account here. We're looking at 14 years to take 1492 from sort of inception to where we are today. And the sort of the idea, the main point of this whole exercise is not that the system is broken, right? There are obviously efficiencies and effectiveness and things that we're interested in improving upon, but it's really hire this third-party entity to work with all of you stakeholders to provide input to the process as it exists today and help us identify opportunities to improve efficiency and effectiveness of the program. In some cases, that may just be communication pathways. It may just be improved understanding, transparency. It may be with regard to web content or documents that we've produced, make them a little easier to understand, just as your recommendation was to Cheryl, right? If we could package that up with the talking points that you put together, Cheryl, that would be really helpful for us moving forward, right? That's excellent input, and that's probably what a lot of these are going to be driven toward. The content's already there. Maybe it's a little bit on CAL FIRE's webpage, some water board webpage, some Fish and Wildlife webpage, some CGS webpage. Is there a way that we can consolidate that, make it easier to understand and tie all the pieces together? That's the kind of thing that these recommendations really get toward, right? One is workflow, but a lot of it's communication driven, whether it's written or verbal communication pathways, things like that. Recognizing that there's multiple agencies kind of working together.
Here's
to
a quick
get these things
fix.
across. So
Why is it
I just
gonna
want to
take
see that a little bit.
3 years to fix CalTree?
What's that?
Why is it gonna take 3 years to fix CalTree? You should be able to get that done in a year.
So let me explain that real quick.
I mean, that's an easy one.
Let me explain that. The steps. Just sort of pencil these things out, what it really requires to increase.
And CalTree eats up time for a lot of people.
It's ridiculous.
But when you consider that, the logistics of improving any data system is a massive lift. So one, you have to sort of recognize the need and get everybody on the same page that there is that need. Once you do that, then you've got to sort of figure out what it is you want. And it's not, I want a new system, but you've got to go through all of the detail to flush out exactly how is this system going to operate, the interface, the interaction between stakeholders, in this case, plan submitters. How is that data that is going to be inserted into the system going to be formatted in a way that the system can receive it? And then once it's received, how are you going to manage the data within the system? And how is the system going to communicate across between CAL FIRE, Department of Fish and Wildlife, Water Board, CGS? So you figure all of that out. Once you've got to get a scope, then you've got to go through the process of preparing a scope with enough detail that you can send that out to bid. The reality is these systems today are oftentimes within the $30 to $50 million range. And so because of that cost, now you need the funding to be able to put that together. That funding, the seeking of that funding and obtaining that funding, sometimes that isn't something that we can just budget amongst agencies. Sometimes that requires some sort of a legislative fix or a budgetary fix. That can take some time. Once we get that in place, then you go to developing that system, which can take a year or two to bring online. And then once you bring it online, you've got to be able to transfer the information that is currently in a system like CalTree's to the new system, right? It's a very, very complex and heavy lift to bring a new system online.
And I would add
Which is
that
why it's really has, so I don't want anyone leaving the fact that should be ideally, yeah, let's find another system, but there are a lot of steps and a lot of money involved in something like that.
right, and it's not a done decision that CalTrees is to be replaced. It's
Right,
more what can
correct.
be improved
Yeah.
and what, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, I said fix CalTree.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it took us, we had an out of the box.
Do you want to
program
announce yourself, John?
John Rayleigh with CAL FIRE. We had an out of the box system with Acela. It took us 2 years of programming.
Yeah.
We're still spending $10,000 to $20,000 a month on programmers. Now we're saddled with a $500,000 bill a year to keep it going, so, which we don't have the money for. So yeah, it's a CalTrees is a system. We want to understand what the issues are so that we can fix our current system. And maybe in the long run, we do replace it, but that replacement will be a massive lift.
Yeah, but I think it can be fixed.
And we would like to hear all that because we do know that there are some, and I think you have someone next to you now. Wants to, go ahead.
And I see a hand in the back too.
Go ahead.
Oh, this is Eric Hinton, excuse me, Forest Rights Manager for Post Research CAL FIRE. I just wanted to add too that in terms of improving CalTrees, we do engage in I would say constant and ongoing discussions on ways to improve the user experience within the current structure. I mean, just yesterday we had a program meeting and we spent, 45 minutes talking about how we could reduce clutter from the external CalTrees. We've improved our naming conventions, we've standardized those, we've done things like improving our categorization of attachments and things like that. I mean, there's still a lot of other hurdles to jump over, but this is something that we do continue to work on the day-to-day, with our existing resources. So it's something that we do. It's part of our just ongoing workload is this continual improvement.
Thank you. Okay, would you like to comment?
Yeah, well, just generally.
And
my-
your name
my
and
name's
affiliate.
Alicia Bales. I'm the director of the Redwood chapter of the Sierra Club. So I'm not a forester, I'm not a scientist, I represent 8,000 of our members in the Redwood region from the North Bay up to the Oregon border. First, I want to really appreciate recommendations 10 and 11. I know that those come directly from the talks that we have been and the input we've been giving to your leadership team, and I'm delighted to see them and very excited in your responsiveness to that. So thank you. And I'm excited to dig into both more improved communication and information dissemination for the public and for our deep commitment to the integral consultation and empowering of tribes in this process. I think that talking about the system working and not being broken, it's working as designed, but it is broken. And I come from Mendocino County, where during the 1990s, CAL FIRE and these regulations oversaw the collapse of the timber industry from overharvesting in our community and the sociological upheaval as a result that we're still living in the aftermath of. So our concern is the Sierra Club and our members. I understand we're here to talk about really detailed processes that are kind of arcane for like kind of normal people to even understand what you're talking about. But we are concerned about the forest and the ecological impacts of this process. And our question the whole time has been efficiency for what? So when we look at 70% of the timber harvest operations in our region are happening under exemptions, that's a real concern for us. Plan complexity is not an issue of efficiency in most cases. It's because we're looking at extremely complex ecological issues, history of extraction over many, many decades, and the ecological realities of endangered species, habitat collapse, cumulative impacts, and no real understanding of the cause and effect between restoration and repair activities and the recoveries that we're seeing among the salmon, for instance. We don't know if it's a cause and effect relationship. So we're interested in ecological performance measures, definitions, as Kimberly said, more science. But this is about a lot of this is functioning as designed because of the power dynamics here, because we're trying to regulate a very powerful industry. And so I think if we can dig into more of the 10 and 11 and make this process more equitable and really look at the concerns for the ecological impacts of the process that you're looking at the efficiency, we should not just lump the environmental concerns into an efficiency framework. These shouldn't just be, that it's if not working quickly or fast to get the plans approved. If 37% of the initial plans are being rejected in the first stage, that might be an example of the process working very well because these plans might be terrible. So that's the concern that we have, is that the ecological issues have to be at the forefront.
Thank you for those comments. And I think I'd like to respond to an aspect there about efficiency. When we're all more efficient, we can do more value added work. And I think this group appreciates that. I think we all want to make sure everyone's doing value added work wherever possible and reducing waste, unnecessary waiting, unnecessary confusion that doesn't have to be there. And that's the objective. And everyone can win that way on that front. But we also have emphasized repeatedly, this is not just about efficiency. This process looks at effectiveness as well. And that comes with quality assurance around the reviews we're doing. And that's why this engagement aspect is a big dimension of what we're talking about. So how do we streamline? Absolutely. And how do we make sure the experience that everyone is having is sufficient? You could argue how that is defined, but we want to make sure people feel that they can access our system. It is complicated, that they understand that they can have successful submissions of their THPs without unnecessary rejections, that we could prevent with better communication. So I think it's a lot of things, but it is about effectiveness as much as efficiency, and how that is expressed. I think we've made clear with our kind of suite of recommendations. So
I think that your suite of recommendations is very earnest and in very good faith. And what we've experienced is that the parties involved are not like the inefficiencies may be built into the system because large timber corporations don't want us to know what's happening out there, right? And so as we try in good faith to figure out, like, honestly, the cause and effect of the ecological impacts and the degradation going on, on private land, masking those things has been a project of the timber industry for a long time. So, and so that's another element that's here that is why our organizations even exist. If everybody was in good faith and just doing all the best things for the best reasons, we wouldn't even need to be here. So
Thank you,
just,
Alicia.
that's just
Really.
a part of the concern that I have.
Thank you very much for the comment. And we can come back around, as I always say. Anyone online?
Yeah, we have one online, and then if it's possible, I'd like to summarize a written comment.
Absolutely. In the order you choose.
Yeah, sure, let's do this.
Maybe really project so that people hear you.
Okay. First of all, the summary comment is from Javier Silva, and he comments that the tribe should be part of the leadership team in reviewing pre and post harvest plans. And then he made a suggestion that possibly including the governor's tribal policy advisor to the leadership team, since that person is in regular communication with most tribes, might be a good suggestion. So that's a written suggestion.
Thank you, Javier.
And then we have a comment, another comment from or a raised hand from Andy Colonna again. So Andy,
Can you say that name again?
Andy Colonna.
Andy Colonna. Okay, unmute yourself. Looks like we're ready for you.
Well, I hope I'm ready for you too. I was involved in all phases of the setting up of the pilot study project to implement 1492, all the way up to and including the final report that was delivered to us in the public review and then to the agency. And the study area was Campbell Creek pilot study. So they reviewed in that final report what they had done right, what was accomplished, and what needed to be done to continue the work on that study area, and recommended that other study areas be included. We had wanted to get the Elk River that feeds into Humboldt Bay. It's been hosed by Hurwitz and Maxam and all that for years, where they tripled the cut when they were advised to only continue it rather than or double it. And they've ruined the place. And now there's continued logging in there. And so we need to take a look at places like that. The Scott, the Shasta are model watersheds that are real feeders of salmonids into the system. And we need to protect and restore and maintain them. If you would go back to the pilot study and look on page 70, where they reviewed the work they had done and recommended more work in other areas be done, I think we would like to see that continue. But it dropped off the edge of the world, and it got shelved for a while. And apparently the money was used and diverted to other projects, but never finished this study. So rather than go through another whole sigma, what you've got going on here, which is confusing and it's overlapping with the other ways that we've been doing it, cumulative impact analysis and all that, I feel like this is an extra step that's making it more difficult to get a whole handle on the process, really. So I don't know what you could say to that, but that's my opinion, and it's well-founded. I've been at this for 50 years and was a reforestation contractor cleaning up behind a lot of timber operations and pioneered the studies that were done on Redwood National Park after it was expanded. And one big thing that happened there, too, was while they were negotiating the final deal, they cut the hell out of the place that became Redwood National Park, and then they got to take the whole the Klamath Glen upper watershed and get that to cut, too. And they hosed the place. Then they planted it and sprayed it, and it burned down in, I think, 83. And you can see it. We have satellite imagery I can show you that shows a big, giant reflective hole in that canopy that is really substantial. And we flew over it to get a good view of what we were seeing out the window of a plane to document the satellite imagery was showing us what the hell was really going on. So more of that, please.
Thank you very much for your comment. Much appreciated. Anyone else online? Well, we have someone. Do we have anyone? And then we'll go to Larry. Okay, Larry, go ahead.
Yes, my name is Larry Camp. I'm a registered professional forester, a small non-industrial landowner, and I'm here today representing Forest Landowners of California, which is a group of non-industrial landowners with properties, all throughout the state. I'd just like to offer a little perspective on, what that group of people, bring to the forest environment. You know, everybody says, well, it's industry out here. Well, industry owns about 6 million acres. Non-industrial forest landowners own 5.3 million acres. Many of those ownerships are relatively small, 10 acres and larger. If you eliminate those that are smaller than that, there are probably still 70,000 individual owners out here. Now, let's look at their length of ownership. Typically, it's less than 25 years. That's half of a rotation for most commercial forest land. If you look at their age, they're typically 55 and over. So they're going to get one shot at maybe a timber harvest unless you've got relatively large ownership. The average ownership is 70 acres through that cohort of ownership. You know, their primary interest in ownership is beauty, protection of nature, wildlife, and privacy. Timber harvesting is a relatively small, you know, less than 15% of the interest in their reason for ownership. Yet, a timber harvesting plan today is going to cost you on the order of $25,000 to $30,000 before you even start the chainsaw. Now, that's discretionary income. You're not getting a loan from Humboldt Redwood or Green Diamond or Sierra Pacific to pay for that. That's just cost out of pocket for the RPF to deal with the programs. If you're concerned about wildfire and wildlife restoration and water quality and carbon sequestration, you've got to figure out a way to reduce those costs. I'm not going to look at specific recommendations because I don't think that you've gotten to that level in your report so far, and which is fine. You know, you're soliciting input at this point. I would suggest that you add a representative from a non-industrial ownership to your management group that can bring the perspective of the non-industrial segment, because you're not going to accomplish all the things that are set out in 1492 without those people playing a key role.
Thank you very
How
much.
Does a modified PHP cost?
Modified THPs are somewhat less, but they're often frequently limited, particularly in the coast, associated because of adjacency to state parks or water courses. Water courses is probably the biggest issue.
Well, and overstory and road building. But the small landowners can use modified THPs and save a lot of money.
Well, they can, but they generally don't. My experience in talking with a number of consultants is that don't. Yeah, modified THPs are used very infrequently. You look at the data and that'll.
Maybe I can, if I could step in and respond on this, to offer some thoughts. I think Clint has something to add, to remind, you know, one of our recommendations, number 7, about strengthening industrial and non-industrial operator capacity and training. That includes building awareness in the small landowner community as well as industrials, but the small landowner community and existing pathways that are actually their muscles, maybe they're not flexing, they're not aware of. We do have exemptions. You talked about building resilient, fire resilient forest stands. We have the forest fire resilience exemption they can avail themselves of. There are other opportunities for them to leverage certain exemptions under certain circumstances that maybe they are not aware of for their small landholding. And also just how to navigate the process. We aim to look at how we might tailor training and accessible submission materials so that it is much more transparent and easy to understand than currently might be the case. We endeavor always, and we already do a lot of work on that front. The CAL FIRE team tries all the time to make sure their materials are as clear as possible, but doubling down on that effort is our aim with recommendation 7. But I don't know if John and then Clint might have something to add there. Go ahead.
Oh, as far as,
John Ramaley from CAL FIRE speaking.
John Ramaley, CAL FIRE, what recommendations?
Oh, just the small and the
Small landowners.
small landowners.
to Alan's standpoint, yeah, there is a modified, you still have to conduct a cumulative impact assessment, you just don't have to submit it. And we can still ask for it.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily the money savings that everybody thought it would be. We do annually take all the new regulations, try to package them up. And of course, we publish the rule book with the board. We try to take all the regulations, update all of our forms. Eric Hedge and the Santa Rosa review team have done a great cumulative impacts assessment guidance that we're working on. Reading has done a lot on MSP, so we've been kind of splitting our duties, but we are really working hard to try to make things a little bit more accessible. Because one thing, this report, I will say that we think this report missed the mark in some places, but one of the things that we do think the report hit on is this is a profession that's written for the licensed professional, and it's not really written for the public. And so our jargon, everything we do is for the licensed professional, and it's very difficult as we're trying to become more and more transparent. And I think that's what this report really is highlighting more than anything, is to try to get people to understand. And we do talk a lot in jargon. Our forms still have it. I think we can update our forms as far as Native American. I think that we can make our forms a little bit more explanatory of why people are getting their notifications. There's a lot of things that we can still improve on, but we do work annually and continuously. Reading and Santa Rosa, I can tell everybody that nobody beats us up more than we do. There's nothing that you guys say that we haven't heard, and we're fine. We're brutal to each other. These guys have meetings, we have meetings, internal, all those. No. At the end of it, we move on because we're passionate. We're really good about our jobs, really passionate about our jobs. And we're trying to be consistent, and we're trying to make we don't make any laws. All we do is enforce them. And so we're trying to make sure that we are all on the same page enforcing those laws in a consistent manner across the state. And it's not easy, especially when we have such diverse ecological regions. Like John is responsible for everything from the Mexican border to the Oregon border on the interior. Eric Hedge is responsible for the Coast Range, and very different. Every one of John's three regions are very different from each other. And believe it or not, Riverside at times we've gotten over 1,000 exemptions for drought neutrality at one point and down south. So it'll go zero, and then all of a sudden it'll go high. So there's a lot of things that happen. It is very complex, as Alan said. But yeah, as far as communication, we work very hard. That I think this report shows that we do have some more work to do.
Yeah. So after 50 years of working on timber plans, I've come to appreciate your work more, and I've learned a lot. And it's been fun actually learning what I've learned. But getting the modified PHVs, I'm seeing a lot of them lately. Have you noticed that?
Yeah, we usually receive, I mean, it's certainly less than 10 a year, but just yesterday we recommended to an RPF, if you had a THP that had some issues that prevented filing, but we did have discussion with them and recommended that you look at the.
Yeah, well, so far this year, I've seen like 8 or 9 of them. A lot of them from industrial timber owners.
Yeah. I mean, if the situation on the ground fits it, it has to fit the land, you
Mhm.
can't make it.
Right.
Where it doesn't work.
It seems like they're using them for thinning.
Yeah.
That was Eric Hedge with CAL FIRE speaking for those online.
Right, John?
John Romali, Calper, Alan, industry can only use the fuel hazard reduction modifier.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, that's new. And for years, they were not using that. And lately, especially on the interior, in fact, John probably knows, they're doing more FHR modifiers.
I have not, John Westner with CAL FIRE, I have not seen a lot. I have not seen that.
That's usually for thinning though. Then.
Yes.
Yeah.
FHR?
Fuel hazard reduction.
Yeah.
Well, John, I really appreciate that statement you made. I think sort of just sums it up, made it really well. So thanks for adding that. Larry, if I could just piggyback on some of the statements you made, and especially with regard to, some of the recommendations and maybe the group as a whole, the recommendations, that are on the screen are really those that we're wrestling with regard to, level of importance for you, meaningful for you, the impact they could potentially have on, you know, the way you do business or the way you interact with the agencies collectively. I'm wondering if we could all kind of turn our attention to this list of recommendations and offer to the AB 1492 leadership team, which one of these from multiple, you know, speak to you most, either with regard to bang of the buck, the impact, the things I just mentioned, which ones really stand out for you? And I don't want to put you on the spot, Larry, if you need a few minutes to think about that and we can come back to you, but I just thought some of the things you were saying kind of spoke to this list, and I was hoping we might be able to capitalize on that.
In fairness, the list is like summarizing the 12 recommendations. That's not a 1-for-1.
Yeah.
Right.
The crosswalk's a little bit awkward, but what I was actually just going to go there. So don't mind Paul Mason Pacific Forest Trust. I mean, some of these feel pretty easy. The stuff you have in green, you know, I think you could just go ahead and make a proposal on some of those things around, you know, putting out some clarifying guidance around roles and responsibilities and some, you know, setting up some regular engagement with interested parties on both the, you know, public and landowner sides of the equation there. I mean, the updated, redesigned, and standardized communication on THP workflow seems like a natural next one to maybe lean in on, even if it's not, you don't have like it's quite as easy. But those would be maybe like the 4 that I would suggest really, like, go ahead and make a proposal and then have another meeting like this that we're down to a little more granular conversation around some specific, like, this is how we see these things. Does this ring as helpful to the various stakeholders who would be interested enough to show up?
Yeah, and I think that remark about I don't know if Clint said it, but I'll repeat it just in case not. But our plan here is once we get a good sense of your priorities, where you think we should focus, what did we miss? Is there a dimension we're just not seeing here? Then, you know, our plan would be obviously after engaging with Board of Forestry additionally and so forth at the next workshop in June, or I should say hearing committee meeting. Our idea is to do additional scoping of these things, not to kick the can down the road, but because we really need to make sure we get it right and that we're after the right solutions. The problem solution sets are clear to us all. And so that would mean that we can activate, maybe it's not forever working groups, but that we have, you know, task-oriented, action-oriented working groups, inviting in partners who want to attend to those and further scope this together. So we think that, I know some have asked, what about working groups? When can we start having more of those engagements? And that's an example of an action we would take, is to activate certain strategic working groups around some of these to scope it more.
Let me just make a cautionary observation about those is, you know, depending on how time intensive they become, how many of them they are, they will just wear out people who aren't funded to work on those things full time.
Yeah, that's our job to sort that out. Yeah, 100%.
So it's like, you know, the Board of Forestry, it's better now and somewhat different now, but it used to be just like endless committee meetings on something. So it was a very accessible public forum. If you had endless amount of time, like if your employer was funding you to be there, it would lead to a very uneven engagement.
Yeah, our you know, I think our leadership team absolutely agrees with that point. And we will certainly be organizing this in a way that considers resources of all parties and respects the time of all parties, and also thematically organizes these so that we're as efficient as we can be, speaking of efficiency. So our goal is not to just make this perennial forever work, but, you know, really be targeted and strategic. So we'll make sure that that is designed into what we do next for these.
That's excellent feedback.
Yeah, thank you, Paul.
I
want to check in online too.
I'd like to see
Go back to
an update from
the
agencies on updated, redesigned, and standardized communications on THP workflow. I want to know what they think. And alignment of THPs with adjacent permitting. But I don't know if there's really big problems there or if it's a continuous thing that they are continually working on the workflow thing. And I want to hear agency input on that.
On those
today.
Yeah. Well, on the permit synchronization, I think that item, you know, how it's prioritized, you know, again, we're looking for feedback on that as well, you know, in the mix. But that is on the radar. And then, you know, the idea with, I think you said the THP workflow piece, that's more of an ongoing endeavor, whereas permit synchronization, you know, would be a discrete time period once initiated that we would pursue. And it may not be limited just to the leadership team to pursue. It could require actions of different boards or commissions as a result of conclusions we find, maybe even legislative action, who knows, to be scoped. So that one, though, I think is more of a discrete timeline, whereas improving it's an ongoing process of updating, ensuring communication around THP workflows is clear to all parties engaging our process. So that's something we got to keep current. We got to make sure that we're managing the change and communicating change. So that's more of an ongoing product.
So is that return thing?
Well, if we could,
That's pertinent to the workflow?
do you want to finish that?
Is the returns issue pertinent to the workflow?
The returns issue, this is not a one-for-one list, but we do have a recommendation on that. If I just go back to consult, I don't have it memorized, but we have action around basically to mitigate the return issue, which we don't think, which we agree, we do not want to have unnecessary, you know, we want to minimize returns for all parties involved because it wastes staff agency time, it wastes that of the plan submitter. And so we have workflow recommendations. Clint, help me out if you can remember what it is, but yeah, we're looking at scoping where the failure points are for that. That's a different action. You know, it's an individual action, but looking at failure points, prioritizing topical areas that center around topics of higher risk, complexity, or where frequent insufficiencies or errors are occurring. So we recognize this is unacceptable return rates are happening. We're doing well, but we need to do better. And so that is a space that is discrete, and it's recommendation 3 on that. And the communication materials on that.
Responsibility lie
for that one.
The return rate.
Well, it's certainly so. Yeah, it touches on a different recommendation, which is about training of staff for one, but actually this one in this case is focused on keeping the RPF community that works for the industry, small industrial, non-industrials, and industrials current on the latest rules so that we minimize the return rate. So there is a thought that there could be sort of an optional, maybe in partnership with industry, an optional training program and certification around expectations and keeping the foresters current, like we do with a lot of forestry or certifications out there. So I think it's a combination of training the workforce to be current, and then also make sure that our materials are as clear as possible about what is expected in our plans. We do that already, and certainly John should be speaking to this more than me. That is a heavy work area for them. I don't know if you want to add to that.
Well, yes. John O'Malley, CAL FIRE, returns have always been an issue. They've been an issue since I started in 2014. The return rate fluctuates. Sometimes it's low, sometimes it's high. A lot of times we're teaching the industry, or we're teaching the RPS or the techs how to write plans because we're doing the review of the plans. Mm-hmm. A lot of times somebody will sign the plan, the tech will write it, and there's not a lot of input from the RPF. And so we're actually in some ways training the RPF. That has happened a number of times. So what'll happen is sometimes we've got a situation on the coast, 2 companies, similar ownership, but one company was doing bad, the other company was doing good, and it flipped. Now the company that was doing bad, they got really good foresters. This is just a common issue, and we constantly look at this, and there's similar return issues as far as archaeology and as far as notification are the primary ones all the time. And we reach out to people, we work with people all the time, and it's just an issue. We do 250 or more complex documents between NTMPs, THVs, Option A's, SYPs, PPEIR amendments. These are very highly complex. We will accept over 2,000 ministerial documents in a year at times. Mm-hmm. As you said, we got 2.3 million acres just in ministerial documents. These are mandated to be approved on. If they are filled out correctly, we are obligated to approve. We don't have discretion. Right. And we get those done in a day, sometimes 5 at the latest. And so we have a lot of workload, but when we come to our discretionary documents, yes, we do the law and we make sure that they follow CEQA, they follow the process.
All right, nice.
As return rates go up, and then they'll go down, and then they'll go back up. And we don't have the control on that. We do the same review, the same process. It's what we get.
And you review for consistency with the rule and internal consistency, like saying, I'm not gonna use this road, and one place in the plan, the other place, it says, I am using this road here. Winter operation, no winter. I mean, there's some kind of sloppy sometimes in plan preparation.
Alan, I'm gonna just, there's a couple people online, so I want to give them some time. And as you unmute the next person, just remind people, we really do want to now also hear from you about, and we're hearing that a little, your priorities, your top priorities, the highest impact areas you think we should center our focus on, because that is one thing we'd love to get out of today. Who do we have next?
Kimberly Burr is unmuted.
Kimberly Burr.
Thank you. Yes, just I wanted to finish my comments from earlier that I couldn't remember, but one of them had to do with the exemptions and emergency permits that are being issued. That seems to me to be overly used, and that they should not be used if there's any commercial component to that. So if the trees are being cut and moved to a mill for that seems to be not to be proper use for like a fuel reduction permit. And so if they're taking trees to a mill, that needs to be subject to more review, because it's kind of incentivizing a cut that does not get reviewed well. And that is, to me, kind of undermines the whole program of CAL FIRE. And I would like to see some consideration of that. Same with the, exemptions for emergencies things. Those need to be evaluated based on whether or not they are being conducted primarily for fire, or they taking out commercial species, and are those commercial species being taken to a mill for compensation. So that, to me, that would be something that these rules could address, because I think that part of this process is to make these rules more effective, make the process more effective for better outcomes. And, not only for foresters, but for the public and for the watersheds that we all share and that we care about. So those would be two things I would like to have you guys throw into the mix is, do the rules and does the process properly allow for review of areas that are going to actually be commercially logged. I think that, the idea that in our area, there's a plan that says it's going to take 88 years to replenish the carbon stocks that are going to be removed from a selection cut on an NTMP. Now that conclusion that this is not a significant impact, it's ridiculous. And I think, California should be on top of all these impacts that are going to happen to our climate. So CAL FIRE could beef up its analysis of that and say, these are not insignificant impacts when you look at the problems that we're facing for watersheds and species and tree growth. Tree growth is slowing down because of climate. So 88 years is not an insignificant impact. And I don't know how that definition can be, perfected, but it is way off base right now. And then if there's an impaired watershed and we're continuing to log it, that does not seem logical. It's impaired for sediment or temperatures. We need to look at that, with our current context and future-proof our watersheds from stuff like that. And I don't think that the review process now adequately addresses those concerns. So
we're at time. Would you like to wrap up your comment there?
Well, hopefully that can be incorporated into an updated version of the process. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that. I would like to just remind about this piece. So the leadership team, the interagency team that manages the timber regulation and forest restoration program, as we mentioned earlier, we do not make the rules, we implement them. That is our job. So the Board of Forestry and other commissions like depending on what's going on and what rules we're talking about. There's the water boards, there's the Fish and Game Commission, or I think I said that right. There's different boards and commissions that make the rules. Or like I say, there's legislation that comes in to play at times. So it just depends on what we're speaking of. And so the point here is to say what you're concerned with there is definitely in the purview, in this case, of the Board of Forestry. That is where these sort of decisions about what is appropriate timber harvest and the level of harvest under a discretionary or a ministerial type of permit are decided. So I just want to manage expectations that that is not our decision. Specifically, that is up to the Board of Forestry and those venues, which are public engagement meetings where you can absolutely engage on, I don't know if there's more to say there, but okay. And you have another comment? Okay.
Jim Hawkins, you are unmuted.
Jim Hawkins.
All right. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. So Jim Hawkins from Green Diamond. So as far as priorities go that you've been talking about, the issue of plan returns would be a high priority one to work on. I think the report did a pretty good job of summarizing some of the key issues about plan returns, and primarily, like was mentioned today about noticing issues and archaeology issues. I think part of the issue there is that it might take a little bit of regulatory change in order to really address some of those return issues to allow CAL FIRE to have, they're working under pretty strict timelines for noticing. If a notice is incorrect as submitted, right, they basically have to return a plan. So if there can be some flexibility built in there, that would be great, or at least great to talk about that. I think the issue about training and more transparent training would be a good priority. I think part of that could include, I know there's a lot of training that happens to CAL FIRE staff that undertake THP review. If that same level of training or the training that they go through can be made available, maybe in a recorded format, so that plan preparing RPFs can be aware of what the people reviewing plans are being trained on. There might be a little bit more understanding there of between the reviewers and the submitters. So I think more transparency and training there would be great. And then I think one other thing that maybe the report didn't bring up in too much detail was the workflow around pre-harvest inspections once a plan does get accepted for filing, and whether or not a pre-harvest inspection is needed and how it gets scheduled. They talked about how it gets scheduled, but I think what they didn't talk about was whether or not a PHI is needed for a plan. So I think that is something in the workflow that could get addressed, is maybe a little bit of a triage effort about really focusing pre-harvest inspections on the plans where they're needed. And then the last thing I want to mention was a little bit of the risk assessment for harvest plans. Not all harvest plans are the same. Some are very complicated. Some are actually pretty straightforward. Understanding the plans that are pretty straightforward in terms of review time and the need for PHI. Simpler plans could go through a simpler review process. So the report hinted at that. I think that would be something worth investigating, especially for non-industrial timber plan owners, submitting harvest plans. Oftentimes they're very simple plans, and they could go through a very simple review. On the other end of the spectrum, as an industrial landowner, we submit a lot of plans every year. We try to be very consistent. We have a lot of information that we put in with each plan. But each plan can be very similar to the next. And some of those can probably go through review pretty quick. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Appreciate
Jim, I
this
think
comment.
that's exactly the kinds of feedback I think we really can use as we're thinking about the recommendations and how, we might prioritize those, not just from a scheduling standpoint, but also kind of a bang for the buck impact on, the stakeholder type of perspective. So thanks for elaborating on some of those points in particular.
Yes, we'll get to in the room. Anyone else online? Good. Okay. Go ahead, Alicia. Elite, you want to remind everyone?
I'm Alicia Bales of Redwood chapter of the Sierra Club. I want to just start out by saying that I would prioritize recommendation 11. It's in there in green with more frequent direct engagement, but I think particularly backing up Javier Silva's recommendation of engaging with the tribal engagement work that CNRE is doing. We're just here to stand in support of what Javier said. John, with CAL FIRE talking about archaeology and notification being one of the big stumbling blocks. It occurs to me that tribal participation in their needs for that, in fleshing out and educating everybody involved in the process about how to work with them would help this a lot. And the voice has been absent so far from this, at least in this room and any of these conversations that we've been having. There are a lot of models for how to empower tribes to make their own decisions about how they want to participate in this process. And I think that would be a really good place to start. I'm concerned about the last speaker's focus on limiting review or speeding up the review process, because the big part of this that's not just a procedural issue is about democratic engagement, because the impacts are shared collectively by everyone in the state of California and the world, because we're talking about our ecology. And the more frequent and direct engagement with the leadership team, I think we're looking at number 10. Your recommendation 10,
That's right,
which
yeah.
is my second favorite one. And I would prioritize that. And everybody in this room can do it for free, starting instantly, which is understand that we don't understand 90% of what you're talking about. And anything that you talk about with acronyms or AB numbers and 9473 point whatever, like, we're capable of understanding this. It's not, well, it probably is partially rocket science, but we can still understand it if you speak in a language that's accessible to the public. And you'll do that if you really value the equity and democratic issues involved here, that the public really isn't just a nice to have. We are integral to this process. We make all of the outcomes better. And so really raising up recommendation 11 and recommendation 10. I like that there are working groups where we might actually have decision-making power in some of these processes. But I think we should be figuring out how the public can have more than just a regular meeting with you guys to talk with you about this. I think there needs to be some way to give the public more of a stake in the outcomes of the process.
Can you explain that a little bit further when you say not just a meeting with you on a regular basis? What do you mean?
We don't have a vote on anything that we do. There's nobody who is from any like elected. There's no function for anyone from the public to have a say in the decisions that you're making, other than coming here and talking to you about them. But in terms of shaping, like, for instance, we're all talking about ecological impacts, and that's not what this is. So at the very beginning of this process, if the public had been more involved in actually shaping the questions or the problem statements, you might have come up with a different outcome. That's all I'm saying is that, and I think it's actually more true and more important for tribal voices to be engaged in a decision-making, like a seat at the table. That's
I think there are opportunities, maybe a couple points of clarification. So there are a couple slides sort of buried in that deck that get to NIVAC's process, the analytical part of the report. And maybe I can meet with you on the sidelines to kind of walk through that. But really, in conducting a whole bunch of interviews and small group working sessions and the survey, that was really the foundation for a lot of these recommendations, right? The information's they gathered from all of those conversations were really coalesced together. And the way the report kind of feeds that and documents those is they identify them as pain points. It's Lean Six terminology. So they identified all of those pain points, call them sources of frustration or concern, synonymous. But she lays all those out, and then those are sort of rolled up to create the recommendations that are here. So at least in my mind, I like to think that there was a fairly robust process in giving folks a voice that are kind of collated here. To your other point, though, with regard to kind of having an opportunity input, these are the recommendations. Each one of these, with maybe exception of a few, will ultimately require a more robust process to develop the recommendation and then figure out how to implement the recommendation, right? And I think that's what Loretta was getting to earlier with regard to an increase in sort of frequency of stakeholder engagement opportunities. So, whether that's a couple of times a year, and then figuring out the timing as it relates to the ledger report and those kinds of things that I was talking about earlier, it's our intent that in building these out, there will be ample opportunity for all of our stakeholders, plans, permittees included, to contribute to the development of these recommendations. It's not going to be helpful at the end of the day if we sort of build out a design and implementation plan for one of these recommendations, roll the thing out, and then everyone has sort of the same feedback, right? That's what we're trying to prevent here. And so the way we prevent that is to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to contribute and sort of thinking through how we'll address each of these recommendations.
Great, Clint, more of that. And I'm, like I said, so grateful to see 10 and 11 in the list of recommendations. Really, thank you for that. You're obviously very responsive when we bring you input, so I appreciate that.
No, absolutely. And you brought up the point of efficiency earlier as sort of being, one of your concerns. And I think when we often think about efficiency, it's faster. One of the things that I think we heard pretty loud and clear in the development of the work plan when we were working with stakeholders, and particularly the permittees, plan submitters in particular, was it wasn't so much go faster. It was a little bit more of it's the redundancy of information that they've got to provide to the water boards and the Department of Fish and Wildlife after they feel like they've already provided most of that to CAL FIRE in their consideration of the plan, right? That reduction of redundant or requirement to submit redundant information is an opportunity to improve efficiency, right? You're not reducing the robustness or eliminating the robustness of the information that's required to be submitted. It's more the method or approach in which it's submitted. So there are things like that I think we need to consider with regard to efficiency or creating efficiencies that aren't necessarily detrimental to the robustness of the process.
It's just that we're seeing with the SQL rollbacks and things like that public input is being considered an inefficiency that we need to cut away, right? And that's really scary for us and dangerous in terms of, the democracy implications of that.
Yeah, and I, at risk of speaking for the agencies, and please correct me if you're wrong, well, there has certainly been, I think, legislation that's been proposed and in some cases enacted in the last few years that does reduce some of the robustness, particularly around, CEQA. The agencies are held to a pretty high standard when it comes to soliciting stakeholder input. Council are very robust standard with regard to tribal engagement in just about everything that we do in implementing the things that we're required to implement. So those standards haven't changed. Where there is legislation that says do less of or do more of, that's out of our hands, right? That's not really our role. We are really here to enact, whatever it is the legislature or implement. So whatever it is the legislature or our boards require of us, right? But the standards with regard to engagement, those don't change. And if anything, in my mind, they're continuing to be more robust and to increase.
I do want to, oh, great, Richard. So we have one comment online, Richard, and then we'll take a check on if people want to kind of after lunch reconvene. So go ahead, Richard.
Thought someone was online.
You want to let them go?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, all right, no problem.
So Brendan Wills or Wilkie?
Yeah.
Great.
Sorry,
Native Plant Society.
Thank you, Brendan Wills with the California Native Plant Society. Thank you all very much for this great overview. It's really nice to have a lot of the report broken down to, a level that's a little bit more digestible. I think to some of Alicia's points, we understand that a lot of the process changes need to move through the Board of Forestry and other various agencies and commissions. I think that a lot of our orgs were aspirational that this process might lead to an opportunity for a little bit more change in process as opposed to just how we're moving through that process in a more efficient way. I mean, specifically, bringing the process to a place where it's a little bit more in line with the intent of CEQA. So anyway, that's a comment on that, and more directly to the recommendations. I really like the list of recommendations. I think these are all great goals. Understanding that some of these, especially, you mentioned that, working on CalTrees is going to require funding. Adding workforce is going to require funding, and those are things that may require legislation. In terms of the more easily attainable goals, I think that all of the recommendations highlighted in green are a great place to start. Our organization, the California Native Plant Society, would really like to see a movement on improved metrics and transparency, especially related to some of the ecological impacts. And I think that monitoring to inform those metrics and transparency are something that we'd really like to see as well. So thank you.
Thank you so much for those comments. And while we're on that topic of monitoring, it is among leadership's priority topics. We have prioritized a lot of, we went through earlier in the meeting, all the responsibilities on our plates with emergency, responding to emergencies and THP reviews and oversight and enforcement and, monitoring is in the mix and among the top priorities. So you can be sure of that. Thank you for the comments and the remarks. And very helpful to hear where you think you want to see us prioritize, particularly in the near term as well. Is there anyone else online? Okay, Richard, go ahead.
I don't know if I have something to say.
You want to introduce yourself to
Yeah,
remind?
sorry, Richard Ginger. I represent Forest River now and then, and I'm on the board of Redwood Forest Foundation Incorporated. You saw Redwood Forest. And I work with different restoration organizations over the years, and I've been involved with this. When I first went to a Forest Practice Act hearing led by John Medgley in Eureka in the middle 70s, when he asked the industry, and that was packed, the room was packed, how's it going? And the sky was falling. The commotion was awesome. Okay, a digression there. But it's one of the things that I mentioned at the Board of Forestry a month or so ago. The Board of Forestry was complaining about the holdups and stuff. And I really want to see I think it's 14 questions that Alicia Goldsworthy talked about and see what that actually was. But it's like, things were real efficient and effective in 1955. You got done what you needed to get done. It was efficient, it was effective, and the whole thing turned around. And to talk about efficiency and effectiveness is really difficult because the public had no say in how the forest was treated in those times. And the whole thing that came about was the impacts during the ad valorem and all that, and the damage and the floods, and then the fires from that overcutting in intensity. So that, boy, it's really, to give, and this is intent to put efficiencies and effectiveness in the care of the resource. This program, I think, and the NIVAC was trying to get at that, and it's really a big change because the public, whether they're indigenous or not, you know, and the agency people, they carry a big weight. But a lot of the public, there needs to be public ombudsman, there need to be Indian ombudsman, there needs to be the capacity for a broader spectrum of interaction to make the effectiveness and efficiency of protection and recovery of the resources be efficient and effective in ways that the culture has not really gotten to, because people talk about conservation ethic. They're establishing a conservation ethic, and all those things that happened, whether it was the Forest Practices Act and the end of the ad valorem and CEQA and the other regulations that really changed entirely everything. And so it's a huge change, and it's like it takes a few generations, you know, like after the destruction of Redwood National Park and all that, to change people's perspectives, and it is changing. There is a very big difference, but how to make that work and so that people can economically support themselves is like really, you have to perform some magic there, because so much of the culture's economic benefit has been based on only effective and efficient ways to use things up. So this is really important to get to. So I'll be more positive after lunch.
Okay, well, you actually answered my question. I didn't know if we have comments online, but, oh, John, is it, or some hand? Sorry?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. There's another, okay, so, we're close to lunchtime and I just want to check, so we'll go to you, Larry, and then no one, okay, great.
I'll try to do it in a couple minutes.
You're good. Timer.
You'd asked me about those recommendations. Let me give you three here. Communications between, I think communications between agencies. For example, I sat in a rules committee hearing that, you know, the water quality guy and the forestry guy weren't communicating, you know, the agencies weren't communicating. Say you had an inspection and water quality is complaining, well, I never got a memo. Yeah. Well, like, is it rocket science that you couldn't send an email to your counterpart in the water board or vice versa? I mean, that's really elementary stuff. If you want to go to technology, how about creating a library through CDFW that lists the professional publications dealing with NSO, dealing with salmon, you know, that anybody could access. I mean, CDFW's got a great library. If you try searching it and looking for a publication, you know, good luck.
We'll task Elliot with that one.
Well, I'm just throwing out suggestions as a member of the team.
No, I appreciate it. I think it's a good one. I just want to get Elliot at least once today.
Yeah. Okay. You know, I think in terms of improvements and develop changing management, you know, let's have CAL FIRE or the agency go back and do a study on NTMPs. It was mandated. The first one was done about 2020. I'm sorry, 2000. Eric, do you remember?
Around,
yeah, would have been okay
under Andrea Tell.
Yeah. That has never been updated. Look at the efficiency of using an NTMP is a process for non-vested or light touch forestry. You know.
What study though? What do you mean when you say do a study?
Study the NTMPs.
Study what though?
Oh, okay. Are there violations? You know, what's the growth and yield in those stands? You know, are there other things that could say, yes, this is a good practice for non-industrial owners, or it's creating havoc with the environment? You know, make an assessment of that. The other thing that I would suggest is that the leadership team go to Director Crowfoot and say, okay, we've got the water board, we've got CGS, we've got CDFW. All of them have different missions established by either regulations or legislation. But sit down and have an internal conference that says our forest lands are falling apart because of fire or, all the issues you can identify. Say, how can we amend our practices and our legislation to improve forest management across the landscape? And, that's a big charge. I'm not saying you're good. This group is going to get it done, but if you really want to think about it, put the various agencies back together. And I mean, I know water quality and fish and game don't always agree with CAL FIRE. How can we reach some consensus to get those agencies, all on the same page? So.
Thank you, Larry.
That's what the leadership is saying.
Yeah, we thought that was 1492 was going to do.
Well, I think in terms of statewide initiatives, I mean, that's a lot of what's happening,
Yeah,
with Secretary Garcia and Secretary.
I mean, that's what this whole thing is about.
Well, I mean, think about the Wildfire Forest Resilience Task Force, right? That's a huge part of why they're assembled and what they've been working on, not necessarily strictly related to commercial forestry, but also the cutting the green tape initiatives and other things. I think the things that you're saying in terms of getting the agencies to the table and starting to think about how we can work more efficiently and effectively together has been a big push over the last 4 years or so. And so I think we're starting to see the fruits of that. I think that's just part of why we're here. And but those are spot on. Larry, I appreciate those comments. Just
Dr. John,
Just a
are we
flavor
getting
first.
any good data on NTMP performance, actual inventory growth, or like they're supposed to report this like as option A's and stuff like that?
John, I'm in the California, they're not mandated to report. I mean, John Wesser and Eric can tell you more, but we do check in on NTMPs. Some haven't been operated on a long time, some have been operated on annually. So it really, we rely on the field to have them tell us for the most part. However, we also will proactively look at MTMPs as well.
So there's no reporting required?
There's no mandate.
So Larry's request can't be actuated, like he wants to know the outcomes, and we don't know. There's about 500,000 acres under NTMP.
I just wanted to.
The negative side of that is to say how many violations have been issued for forest practice rules. That is the opposite way to find out whether the plans are working or not.
No, but you want to know what's going on with inventories too.
Yeah, but I just wondered if John could explain what an TMP is to Alicia's point earlier.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
No acronyms.
A non-industrial timber management plan is essentially a lifetime management plan. However, you have to harvest timber, you have to submit a notice of timber operations, which are good for 1 year. And that notice of timber operations, you have to certify that there's no new conditions that haven't been already analyzed in the NTMP and that you're going to follow the plan. One of the benefits about the NTMP is technically you can lock yourself into the rules at the time that you get approved. There are some cases where you may need to update your NTMP as far as if you've got threatened or endangered species that we feel maybe your NTMP isn't adequately covering at that time. But it is essentially a lifetime plan, and when you get that plan, you are kind of locked into the rules at the time. So as the rules, it's kind of a hedge against regulatory creep. Regulatory creep does, and the NTMP allows you to keep some.
So the benefit for the landowner is no regulatory creep, but they have to give up even acres silviculture. They can't clear cut, but they can cut down to 75 feet per acre.
Yes. Yeah, it has to be uneven age, right? You can use intermediate treatments to get you to uneven.
Yeah.
What does lifetime mean? The lifetime of the person who wrote the plan?
No,
It runs with the property unless the department says you're violating, the terms of the NTMP, or the landowner wants to voluntarily suspend it.
And
But-
what you're saying is we don't have a review that shows us how that program is doing?
Well, I can tell you, generally, there are about 700 NTMPs. Right now, you're getting maybe 5 or 10 a year. And, part of that is, I've seen agency comments, this is a lifetime plan, so we need to examine this, with a microscope. That's not the way the NTMP was intended to operate. It was supposed to be a light touch, uneven age, management system. And now agency review oftentimes is acting like this is, God is gonna unleash the flood.
No.
There's between 400,000 and 500,000 acres currently of NTMP in the state. And yes, the agencies look hard because it's forever. So they have to be careful.
All right, so folks, thank you for this conversation. I do recognize people might need a break, lunch. I certainly need lunch. So we're going to take a break. I already heard Richard say that he would like to comment after lunch. So we will now make sure we carry on after lunch. Or were their hands on the phone line? Yeah, so we definitely will. Yes, Eric.
I'm Eric Huff, Deputy Director for Natural Resource Management for the department. And I just wanted to clarify that there was a report required by the legislature when they created the non-industrial timber management plan and statute. You can actually read the requirement in the rule book. So that is why the department had to provide a report on the effectiveness of the non-industrial timber management plan in terms of sustained yield. And that probably did happen somewhere around 2000. I do recall then Director Andrea Tuttle
I remember
requiring that of the department. There is no reason why we couldn't do an evaluation of the NTMP at this point in time. And I'm sure the forest practice staff would love to have another task to perform. But there's no reason we couldn't look into that. And I do think, I know this is a complete aside from the topic of the day, but I do think there's some work in looking at whether or not NTMP landowners are getting the bargain that they signed up for with this NTMP document. So
some of them aren't even harvesting.
Yeah.
So on the coast, it's different than in inland. We have a lot of NTMPs, but we get very few NTOs. And there's two reasons. One, log market, right? You can't sell a log, you're not gonna do an NTO. The other reason is a lot of these NTMPs have now been burnt up, right? So they use them and they salvaged off of them and they planted their NTMPs allow them some CEQA analysis to get grants, but a lot of those NTMPs are, they're not gonna be used for another 50 or 60 years or ever again. So there is the data that we do have on NTMPs. We know how many NTOs come on each, right? We know if there's been emergency salvage, if they burnt over and they salvage, so we can tell you how much, what's still in play, right? And we know how often they're being active. So those are the things, and we know what violations have occurred within. Those are all data points that we can get and are available to help.
Okay, so I do want to, folks in the room,
John Weston, Program Manager for CAL FIRE.
I just want to make sure we don't go, we're gonna, sorry, I just want to make sure we weren't going to continue the discussion. We can pick it up after lunch. Absolutely. We can absolutely pick this up after lunch. It sounds like it's a great topic, and thanks Eric for the additional remarks. So we can return to that. But I think our notes have been taken on this interest for us to report out on NTMPs more specifically. We will talk about that and follow up. So we will have lunch now until. All right. We just want to make sure we hear from everyone again after lunch. So we're back to back in order, folks online. Elliot, is everything clear on your side? Great. So we're just resuming comments from where we left off before lunch. We have a timer, and if people would like to kind of one by one make additional comments or add additional thoughts about their priorities here or areas that they feel like would have the highest impact, or anything we're missing here, anything we're missing about our process, the way THP timber harvest plans are reviewed from a process standpoint. We're definitely taking that input. Anyone online or in the room like to pick up where we left off?
Can I just throw something out really quick?
Sure.
I get you say this about process.
Your name, you want to?
Jim Berg, Water Quality. So we were talking about NTMPs at the end of, right before lunch. There was a couple studies of NTMPs in the early 2010s, CAL FIRE did one, Clay Brandau put it out under his name, and then the water board, when we were redoing our permit for NTMPs, we did one as well. So
Is there a way people could find this?
yes, CAL FIRE is online.
Whereabouts? On their forest practice page or?
He charges $10 for a copy.
Can I do that? It's probably around somewhere. It was part of one of the various I think it was 4 prime. I think they did a 4 prime on NTMPs.
Yep.
It's an acronym.
It's a monitoring.
It's a long acronym. I don't remember. It's forest. I don't know.
Why didn't you send them a copy? Pick it up.
Yeah, we pick up the NTMP one and then see what I still have from my box of tricks that whatever kind of.
All right, so I'm hearing that our departments will furnish NTMP related studies for interested parties. You would need to email me, Loretta Moreno, and I'll put my email address up at the end here anyway. So take down my email address and tell me if you're interested in those reports, and then I can route them to you all. Thanks, Jim. All right, any comments online, Elliot, at this time? Okay. How about in the room? Richard, I know you indicated maybe you have more to say.
Well, Richard, can I just clarify on the NTMP thing and then we can move on a bit? But like you were talking about kind of assessing how the NTMP program is working, right? Do we have something like that for the THP? I mean, that's more of what we would be interested in. It's like, how is it working on the ground?
They did 4 prime they did it for several years. And there's been before that, there was like the hill slope monitoring. There has been quite a bit of work looking at that. And then there's the effectiveness monitoring program, which has been a lot of continues. Yeah.
That's through the Board of Forestry?
That is through the Board of
And it's
Forestry.
a committee that meets?
It's the
Okay.
yeah, what's that?
You're involved with that.
Yeah, the effectiveness monitoring committee is a committee of the Board of Forestry, and they convene monthly, I'm pretty sure, isn't it every month?
Periodic.
Periodic convenings. It's a mix of academics and agency personnel who sit on the committee. They allocate funding for one to support research of interest. We have kind of some priority topics that are listed there. But anything that like basically tests the forest practice rules and their implementation and effectiveness. So it can be taken at different scales. You can look at it from a very, regional or statewide lens. You can look at it at a very project level. So they have various monitoring initiatives ongoing and they fund them, they review them. That's one space. The monitoring is often very, like I'd say, nested or, like a nested set of things. So there's kind of statewide assessments. There are assessments at the project level. There's assessments at the regional level. And I'm sure, John, you would like to add.
Yeah, so 4 prime is forest practice rules, implementation, and effectiveness monitoring. We're doing 4 prime 2 right now. We're actually actively looking at post-harvest conditions on THPs and NTMPs. I think the first.
Cumulatively? Cumulatively?
We're doing a random sample across the state to determine if they implement the rules as required, are those rules effective? Like if you put water bars at a certain space, and is that effectiveness of reducing erosion? So that's what they're looking at. There's compliance. Our inspectors do compliance monitoring, right? Are you following the law? That's compliance. Effectiveness monitoring is if you are following the laws, does it work?
Does that have the desired outcome?
And that's what they're looking at right now. So they are doing the second version of it. The first version was largely done by the units. And so now we have a separate version that's done just with our monitoring crew. And there's 5 people, 5 Forester 1 dedicated to monitoring with the Forester 2 running. So they've got about 35% of them so far. It's a 3-year project. So we're about a third of the way through.
And just to finish off with that, so what made that happen? Was there a request, or was there legislation, or you just internally?
There was legislation that created the monitors to begin with. I think it was 1948, and then we had, I know when there was a number, I think it was actually, it might have been the oak woodland one that actually first started monitoring. Then we put in a BCP proposal to get those monitors. There's been a couple of like SB 901 has been passed. So there was, and we've met that. We've spent 5 years meeting those legislative conditions. Now we're out of that legislative, but now on our own, because that was to tackle specifically emergencies and exemptions. And we do have those reports published. Now we're looking back at THPs and NGs.
And who, just let me finish up, Alan. So is there a public process and is there going to be a public report?
There will be a public report when we're done. Right now, that's not a public process. It's basically internal. We do have other agencies invited, primarily CGS is going out with us on all of this.
So my question related to that would be, do you look at fan outcome as far as fire resiliency? Like, are they facing things? Are they thinning from below to reduce fire risk and growing larger trees? There's a qualitative component. I don't know if that's in that.
They are not. It's primarily shade canopy over water courses, sediment. That's kind of, those are the primary things.
Yeah.
Kind of the standard that we looked at originally during the first floor.
Right. So you think it would be a good idea to look at the qualitative aspect?
Yeah, I mean, we can take our monitors once they are looking for new programs. We're going to probably have them even look at some MSP documents. So there's a lot of things now that they're kind of free from the legislative mandate. We have a lot of ideas for.
What's MSP?
Huh?
What's MSP?
Maximum sustainable.
Yeah, basically LTS for sustainable. So we're going to be looking at some of the people's sustainable plans.
All right. Did you have something else, Alan? Or?
Well, it was just the larger tree and the spacing and the thinning, depending on region. It varies by region what your objective is, fire resiliency as well as productive forest. And actually, there is a PowerPoint that Chris Marantha did trying to get at reporting on LTSY. And he gave a demonstration of the forest project that I was working on. And it shows how we have been increasing the larger tree diameter and what the different species and volumes will be. So I think it goes out to 2050, 2060. And he's saying this is how you should do it. And that is how you should do it. But the rules that, going back to the Board of Forestry, don't promote that at this time.
Okay, well, today's discussion definitely, while this is important, this discussion is really looking at our operational work processes around THP. So I think the discussion around monitoring and what additional monitoring we should do is absolutely appropriate, perhaps for these check-ins we have with you, these kind of quarterly types of check-ins, to talk more in depth about a topic like that.
So when they close the plan, they inspect for compliance?
Yes.
Yeah. It's the plan closure.
Yeah.
This is the kind of stuff that if we were sort of in the conversations, we'd be fleshing this out and giving our direction about where we think the kind of, implementation should go. But we're all learning this stuff together now. But if we were involved in the process in more of a at the table kind of role, then we might be able to give our input about priorities way earlier.
Yeah, and I would like to remind everyone, the door is always open. Richard often reaches out to me or other members of the program. Yeah, absolutely. And so we have conversations and we schedule time. We make time for this. And so, as you know, we're making time for kind of quarterly check-ins. As mentioned, we have a plan to kind of have a more organized, broader discussion and thematically organized. Like, we'll decide on sort of the forum, the format. We can talk about all that. So our door is open, and just people need to know enough. So I think that's, something to keep in mind. But so moving us along, I want to make sure we do at least wrap up on the recommendations here today. What's missing? What would you like to emphasize or prioritize? Anyone on my?
Yeah. You had 3 questions up there. Do you want to put those back up, or was that?
Oh, prompting questions. Yeah. Well, the questions really are just what we,
okay,
I don't have them in front of me, but basically what are your, what would you like to prioritize? What's missing? Effectively, anything you want to comment about what you see.
Yeah. Andy Colonna, you need to unmute.
Andy Colonna. You there, Andy?
Can you hear me now? Hello? Hello?
Hello, we can hear you.
Well, I asked you a yes or no question, okay? Can you hear me now? Yeah, okay. Anyway, my colleague Vivian Hellewell in this work had to leave on a important appointment she had, but she handed me this rule book from the Forest Practice Rules Northern Forest District and said, hey, read this forward from Jerry Partain. Because the answer to your three questions, to me, is that there's no overarching view of what the goal of forestry should be in the first place. So let me read this to you on my time here. The goal of modern forestry is to manage the resource so that its benefits will continue undiminished for all future generations. Persons who have studied or worked with specific area of resource management are confident they have full capacity to manage the total resource on that site. However, the demands on the forest are so broad that no one single discipline can adequately perceive every management impact. Often, too, those closest to the ecology of a forest tract cannot have the broader view. That which is judicious management for a property this year may produce adverse effects on the site in later years on nearby properties today. The forest practice rules have an attempt to bring together the concerns of workers in the forestry and of laypersons and professionals in other resource areas to assure a continuous supply of forest products without damaging the resource base. This requires the consideration not only of forestry in the traditional sense, but also of fisheries and wildlife, watershed protection, aesthetics, recreation, potentials. There's more there, but I can tell you, when I got here in 1973, I went to the library and started reading up on forestry stuff. And I found the Forest Practice Act had been passed. And then in there, what really amazed me was pertinent excerpts from the California Wild and Scenic Rivers Act that Governor Reagan signed into law in 1972. So these issues of aesthetic value, recreation, and fisheries are embedded in the rules and the packages. So what I want you to do is manage for all those resources, and including tribal beneficial uses. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the comment. And my team can also remark, but I think that, yeah, that is exactly why we have this interagency team from California Geological Survey. We have Fish and Wildlife. We have, sorry, it's an afternoon. Great. We have water boards, we have CAL FIRE, we have all of these resource management entities very highly trained in the resource protection matters that you've brought up at the table and working with industry, with small private landowners as well. So we definitely agree that these are critical resources that we're charged to protect. But thank you for the comment. I don't know if there's anything else to say on that. Any other comments online?
I'm trying to ask somebody who wants to get it. Just kidding.
He was reading a quote from Jerry Partain, was he not? Yeah. What he said? Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you like us to move to the next step slides?
Yeah, we could do that while we're waiting. So the next step slides maybe are a little further on. Jane. Let's see. So we'll warm you up to where we're headed here. All right. So, so as far as next steps, so that you have a sense of what our immediate proximate next steps are. So we're going to be reviewing and considering your feedback from today's workshop. I will highlight on the next slide, and maybe just if you could just jump to that next slide while I'm on the topic. I'm going to keep the comments open for the next week. So a week from today, May 22nd, you can email me at the email address here, which, by the way, for people that want that NTMP documentation, you can email me as well, and I could coordinate facilitating getting those if you ask for the NTMP related material again to you. But my email address is up here. You have till next Friday to kind of really continue to think about this. If you felt that what you already said, if you have more to say that you didn't already say today, because we definitely took notes on everything that was said. So you don't have to repeat that, but if more comes to your mind, absolutely, please send comments. And entitle your message so that it's clear it's about the Lean Six Sigma recommendations that you're commenting on. So if you go back to the other slide, we'll come back to this too if you need. But then the next step on this journey we're on is to go to the Board of Forestry and hear from the Board of Forestry, and there will also be additional feedback from the public possible, where we will have incorporated the considerations from today, and go back to the Board of Forestry since we had our March meeting before the Board of Forestry. By the way, if you want to go back to that meeting, you can go to the Board of Forestry website for March and you can listen back to kind of the whole discussion that was had at that time. But at this meeting, we'll meet with the Board of Forestry. Then after that, we'll duly incorporate additional feedback and considerations as we look at crafting a final sort of proposed work plan around where we prioritize, when we hit these topics. And that'll really be informed in part by your priorities that you've set out here today and in your comments to come. So do we have any online?
Yeah, we got a hand up and then I'll summarize the question from Clayton Code.
Maybe speak up.
Yeah. From Clayton Code, I would like to better understand the commitment to continuous improvement / change management for THPs. This reads like practitioners might expect inconsistent or unpredictable review standards.
Did you?
John, let's take that one.
I don't.
Not quite sure, but
I'm not sure what the question is.
Yeah, question. So I asked him to verbally, so maybe I'll jump in with a hand raise.
Okay, that would be great.
Like that's what John's wheelhouse.
We also had another hand raise from Kimberly Burr. So I will.
Kimberly Burr.
Yes, thank you. I'm just trying to frame my question so that it would fit into your kind of framework that you're working with. And I think one of the areas that you're looking at is effectiveness and good outcomes. And I interpret that to mean that, you know, you want good outcomes for watersheds, for timber workers, and for plan submitters. So not just plan submitters. So taking all the comments in a way that acknowledges that, you know, we are looking for effectiveness and good outcomes in the watersheds, I think is important. And maybe I'm totally off base, but you can correct me. I'd like to hear what your interpretation is. And then also the idea that we need to figure out how we can modernize the approach. And I don't know if that's a workflow thing that you guys, maybe there's somebody in the room who could talk to that. You know, how do we modernize workflow so that it does make effective outcomes in the woods for, you know, sustainable climate, sustainable timber volumes, or, you know, and sustainable watersheds? What in the workflow needs to change to make sure that those outcomes are not all the outcomes that we've seen in the past, that they are actually improved outcomes? Thank you.
Yeah, just quickly, maybe I'll take a stab at that. The way I'm kind of looking at this is probably more of a stepwise approach, where the way the recommendations are laid out, the first objective is really to make sure that any, you know, printed or guidance documents that we currently have available to us that have been developed are sort of revisited with an eye toward making sure that those printed guidance documents, web content, whatever it is, clearly align with Board of Forestry, Board of Practice rules, sort of requirements. And I would take that a step further to say that, you know, we also need to take into account water board and fish and wildlife requirements, right? So we think about a THP, it starts at this point A. We need to sort of get to point B, and there are a whole litany of steps involved that need to be identified and then sequenced appropriately. And then with each one of those steps, after they're prioritized or identified and sequenced, then it's figuring out sort of who has responsibility with each one. right? And so for in many cases, at least the entry points, a lot of that responsibility is going to be between the plan submitter and CAL FIRE, potentially Fish and Wildlife on you know, the biological aspects and that kind of thing. Then there becomes a point in time where things have been prepared and now there's an opportunity for stakeholders to comment, interact with the process. We identify those points and how they can interact and how they're notified and what have you, and we just work our way all the way through that workflow. My thinking is that once we build that out in a comprehensive fashion, and like I said before, the THP guidance document that CAL FIRE has already prepared is an excellent framework for that, right? Most of what we need is already there. It maybe is just inserting a couple more points. That one sort of stands alone because that's designed for the plans practitioner. But maybe there's another one that says, for all of those interested in the holistic view, you know, here's all the other opportunities to engage and how the process works. I think once we go through that exercise, there will probably be, or maybe, things that we sort of recognize that could be fixed or tweaked to make the process a little easier for whoever. If that's the case, if we were to encounter that situation, then I think the 1492 leadership team would probably be in a position where they could make a recommendation to the Board of Forestry or whoever, just to call attention to the matter, right? Here's an opportunity. But they are in the driver's seat and they make those decisions whether or not they want to make those changes or not. But having gone through the process with all of you about identifying and sequencing those steps would allow us collectively to identify those places where we might be able to make some tweaks. So that's kind of how I see this playing out with regard to workflow. I don't know if I answered your question pointedly, but that give you a sense of how we'd work through this and how that might play out.
So adding on to what you said, what I was gonna say from the will-do list, there, from my experience and from what I hear talking to everybody, some of those things are ongoing now, and I'm not sure you have a good idea of exactly where they are in the process of where you want things to go. So like, there needs to be some sort of framework of communication where you bring up those specific issues and find out where they are at and where they need to be going.
Gap analysis.
Yeah, to make it work, which adds on to what you were just saying.
Exactly.
Because they are ongoing process, and the agencies aren't really getting credit for what they have been doing and what is in process, and we just don't know where they are at on each one, because I've noticed, like I brought up cow trees before, things have changed with cow trees a little bit over the time since the exception, but there are other things I'd like to see happen there too, and I think RPFs would even more, so they use it more than I, and I hear more complaints from them than from me about it.
Yeah, those are the types of things that we would try to identify and address, right?
Yeah, so I don't know how to make that work though. You have to actually go in there and have some, by topic, have a meeting on each topic.
That's right.
And go through it and try and figure out where they are at.
Yeah.
In the process.
That's, you know, like a lot of what you saw, the to-do list, as you put it, you know, one of the major next steps is once we get through this iterative feedback process, is to do more deep scoping, where we will have sort of, we'll confer among leadership team, but open the doors more to our partners on certain topics, because we know we need to scope more fully on these items. Is there anything more on like?
I wanted to make sure we followed up with the gal that was on the phone that just spoke.
Yeah, because you want to make sure you answered her.
I want to make sure we answered her question. I don't know, Elliot,
Do you remember?
I can ask her to unmute.
Yeah, just to affirm if she feels we answered the question.
You can speak to her now. I'm actually on here.
Miss, was I able to answer your question?
Kimberly.
Kimberly.
Kimberly, we're just checking in with you. If you're speaking, you need to unmute.
Right.
And we go back to Clayton.
She's in there.
There we go. I was waiting for the unmute button. Yeah, thank you for that. And I appreciate that there are focus on workflow but my question really had to do more with the outcomes and effectiveness in what the workflow is going to produce. So I don't know if that is beyond what you guys are doing, or you just simply trying to streamline, and because I thought that was a little bit broader than that.
Yeah, the way the recommendation's written, the goal is to improve transparency, right? And lessen confusion. And so the outcome ideally would be clearer documents, more easily to understand documents by the parties that are involved that mirror essentially what are the requirements within the forest practice rules for THP submittal and that. So it's really thinking about the guidance documents, any of the informational written documents that we have either on the web or otherwise with any of the agencies that relate to the THP process, really thinking about those, revisiting them and making sure that they clearly align with what the legal requirements are.
Yeah, making sure they're reflective of the latest and greatest. And also maybe we, pending resources, can do more than just document, communication. Maybe there's videos, maybe there's other ways that we can make our information more accessible and understandable to the different parties for, the different needs that folks have. So that'll be part of our scoping, is just how we're communicating in the first place. How might that be improved? Yeah. So, all right. Any more comments online? Okay. How about in the room? Larry?
Just a quick suggestion. You said you were gonna leave this open for a week.
Yeah.
How soon might these slides be, or, this document be posted, and would it be on CRNU website?
Yeah. So, you all have, people in the room have the copy.
Right.
And then what I would suggest is that I believe Jane or Elliot, correct me if I'm wrong, I should be able to get people's emails from the Zoom. I think we have their emails. But if you go to the next slide, we have my email address. So if you would like a copy of the slides, for sure, I can email you a copy of the slides. And then we aim to get it on our website as soon as possible. But right now, I can't just give you an exact time.
Okay, no, I would suggest maybe extending it, beyond the 1 week notice, unless you're under some time pressure.
We are with the Board of Forestry meeting.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, we do.
Because I would like to send this to some of the people that I know that are involved in management and be able to say, here, look at this, and do you have ideas to, meet your manager?
Yeah. I did just realize that you can't email this very easily, so I'll have to figure something else out.
It's a large file, and the issue is it takes a little while for us to do the ADA compliance check before we can post it on our website, so it's just another.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I understand. So I just offer it as a suggestion.
Yeah, but we definitely, we're.
Yeah.
Do you have a summary document of the recommendations you can email?
Take a couple of.
I mean, the Lean 6 report, and then we have we could email the summary. We could distill down.
Is the recommendations
I don't
the things we're.
So your recommendations are still in flux, is what you're saying.
Sorry?
Your recommendations are still in flux.
So part of the recommendation, the whole engagement.
The recommendations are not in flux. The recommendations we presented today are a bit of a summary of the true recommendations in the report, just for the ease of digesting during a meeting like this. The challenge we have is that, per state agencies, at least was talking about, in order for us to post documents on our websites, they have to comply with Americans with Disabilities Act standards, which means the color scheme, the fonts, all the things have to be able to, and there's a little certificate that goes with that, and then we post it. We haven't, because of our attention just getting this presentation ready for today's meeting, we haven't had an opportunity to go through that process yet. It can take, 3 or 4 days. Probably it'd be latter part of next week before we can get it ADA certified and posted to the web. But we have copies. We can figure out how to email it. I think the best thing to do potentially is, if you'd like a digital copy, contact one of us at the leadership team. maybe we can break this down, or maybe we can turn it into a PDF that's a
We
little
will route it,
smaller
yeah,
size,
we will
and then
do
we
it.
can route it that way instead of
Yeah.
it being PowerPoint.
Yeah,
We'll
I
figure
would
it out.
suggest taking out your color photographs, that would reduce the size.
Yeah, we'll figure something out.
Actually, reducing the photographs helps ADA compliance, since you have to have an explanation of every photograph, so.
Yeah, so maybe we can do this a little faster when we eliminate the imagery and
Yeah.
everyone just has to believe us when we say it was beautiful originally.
Start working on it this afternoon or Monday
It's
morning.
great to have them, but you know. if you
Thanks,
were-
good suggestion. See, teamwork right here.
But I would add too, though, this isn't the end of the road in terms of accepting
Yeah.
comments. I mean, even though we
Oh.
asked for that, so we can be sure we've had a chance to review this when we then have our next kind of engagement with the Board of Forestry. But certainly, if you have other folks that are going to want to comment, they're going to have opportunities.
Yeah.
To get their feedback into us.
Yeah, so that June Board of Forestry Forest Practice Committee meeting would be another touch point.
When is that?
That is June 18th?
I think so.
I think it's June 18th. But you can definitely find information on the Board of Forestry, Forest Practice Committee meeting agenda, or not agenda, but I should say schedule, the date on their website. Easy to look
No,
up.
I was looking for it.
June
Find it.
16th.
It's under, yeah, they have like
9
a
a.m.
board
9
business
a.m. Okay,
tab.
Thank you.
For forest practice, it's at 4?
For forest practice is on the 16th, but we're probably gonna run it as a joint committee for
At 9 a.m.
at 9 a.m.
Okay. Great. Any other comments today? Anyone online?
Richard?
Richard Ginger.
Sorry, Richard Ginger, Forest Forever. I'm really, taken with, NIVAC's optimizing workflow, and modernizing technology and improve, data credibility. And we're going through that in a lot of different ways, and the resource agency, TRFR, are going through the same thing because it fits into this modernizing technology. And the excerpt from NIVAC, establish and enforce standards for THP template use and submission, including refreshed standards for inclusion of maps and other technical reference material submitted with the THP. And you all have been rebuffed on your request for geotextile information. All right? And there's a need to have geotextile information, excuse me.
Geospatial.
Had too much restoration work with geotextile fabric. But,
Geospatial data.
geospatial information in the harvest plan itself, the standardizing communications framework, to have reliable, information that is something that NIVAC feels is really important. And obviously you do. It was, I think, Mark Jameson about 6 years ago wanted a better MSP process, and Loretta wanted a geospatial better process. It's taken this long just to get it, and it's getting a lot of resistance. And the LiDAR and all these things should be the tools that are presented and taken, that they really need to add to the process as soon as possible. Like LiDAR information in harvest plans could happen, I think by the end of this year. You know, these are things that are really why this modernization has been held off for so long, because foresters and people are similar interest have been using LiDAR for years. It's sort of like, you know, how else can you better evaluate topography than using LiDAR? And then LiDAR also is used down to specific trees. And you all are trying to do a lot of this LiDAR stuff for fire hazard, and so that you can show that California forestry has a climate change positive influence. Is that true? And so it's going to be, you know, if we depend on the Board of Forestry to, on their own, do what has happened, there would have been no new Forest Practices Act. CEQA would not be applied, and any number of other things, because there's resistance, because the real problem is people with the industry and trying to, the foresters, I've been told by a forester, are trained to make money out of trees. And as long as the efficiency and effectiveness for doing that, it hasn't been translated to the broader cultural overlay. And that's where the agencies come in, the responsible agencies, because a lot of times the responsible agencies are the brunt of the problems. And just having it so required, so there's LiDAR in harvest plans, and that there's a series of aerial photos that show what happened over time and have the geospatial, what you're trying to drive at, happen. You know, and there's this big hang up about proprietary interests, right? Well, yes and no. I mean, that's been one of the problems of trying to get adequate stream network shut, you know. And there needs to be some way to overcome this, because we're really stuck in a place where what can be done is stuck and not being implemented. And just one more little aspect on that. It's really irritating in 1492 in the annual report, evaluating ecological performance. And there is no procedure for how that should be done. The specifics that I think is in NIVAC, there needs to be specific steps and evaluations that can be effective. So should there be like an analysis for THPs, a QMD before the harvest plan, after the harvest plan, so that you can show that there's actually an increase in the size and quality of the forest as it goes? So there needs to be something that the public and people can actually hang their head on to know that positive activities are happening that have data and credibility.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Richard. Any other?
Yeah, there's another comment.
One last comment online, and then we can probably move to wrap up.
Yeah.
Okay. Andy Kona has his hand up again, so.
Are there other hands up, or is it?
That's just.
Okay, and then.
And you need to unmute.
Okay, did I?
Yes, you did.
Okay. Yes, I do have more to say that you didn't already hear from me. And that is, one day I asked the executive director of the Board of Forestry, where is the magic place to hit this whole diamond in the rough so that it pops, so that all these beneficial uses can be met? He said, documenting cumulative impacts. That is the linchpin in the regulatory framework. If you can show cause-effect relationships of variables such as timber production and the decline of fisheries, you have a case. It'll stand up to the rules of evidence. Anything less than that, you're playing touch. If you want to play tackle, you got to get the data and present it in a way that everybody can understand it. So that's what we do, is to try to understand those relationships. And in the process, we found a lot of really good literature. And one of them, I want to suggest that you get into the record as soon as possible. And that is a document produced by the DWR called Watershed Management for Highly Erodible and Unstable Areas. And they feature several parts of the Klamath River system, the lower Klamath, Klamath Glen, Blue Creek, and Grouse Creek in the Trinity River. And they made maps of geology, landslide, timber harvest, soils, and one more I can't think of right now. But anyway, they put that together for each one of these areas. And so it was pursuant to the Clean Water Act amendments for non-point source pollution. So when California and all the other states were mandated to follow up and identify BMPs, best management practices, in their areas to fulfill the goals and objectives of the Act. So they formed in California a 208 review team. And so in the study on page 4, the author says, one serious problem arose early in the study. That even though Simpson and Arcata Redwood were part of the review team, the interdisciplinary review team, to go out and look at it, they would refuse us access to their lands. And I did some work after they finished what they were doing out there, so I can tell you why they didn't want anybody to see it, okay? However, that document was suppressed because people didn't want to, I mean, the big boys did not want to get that out. I called the author of it at the time, this is several years ago, about 94, and I said, hey, Ralph, Scott was his name, why didn't you sue when they refused access? He goes, well, we thought about it, but we were outgunned, and there were only us and a few hippies that knew what was going on out there, and we felt powerless. So it's on the shelf. I got five copies of it in a box. If you want one, I'll send it to you. I said, yeah, do it. So we want you to have that. We just ran out of copies of it, but I think you'll find it. It's really what you need, the missing link in understanding what the hell is going on here, including what Richard just said about private information and all that. That's history. With satellite imagery and aerial photos, that's a joke. They can't get away with that anymore. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you for the comments. Thank you very much. All right, we are at a wrap. Just thank you for attending today, traveling into Sacramento. Some of you very far away, starting out very early in the morning, everyone online. As I have it here, again, if you have more to say, that I should say not that we didn't hear from you, but that we haven't heard about. So other topics that you might not have expressed or comes to mind later as you're driving home, please do feel free to reach out to me between now and next week. You know, just by Friday is the goal. And then we will take that into consideration. Then you have the Board of Forestry in June. The Forest Practice Committee is another touch point to hear more as this advances. And thank you everyone for your time. Anything else to cover, Clint?
No, I agree. I know it's a lot of time on your days. Some of you are paid to be here and other ones are not. But the input you provided today is really helpful in helping us get our hands wrapped around sort of the meaning of these recommendations as it relates to you and what you do and to help us prioritize. So we'll be in contact for sure on next steps and lots of opportunity moving forward to help us build these things out. So thanks you.
Thank you, everybody.
And so the leadership team is going to have some public at it in June.
Sorry?
You don't have a date for a leadership team in June yet?
Not leadership team, the Board of Forestry.
No, but the four times a year, quarterly, supposed to be June.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can talk about that after.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was my question.
But the Board of Forestry for the for follow up on this discussion and next steps would be June 18th. No, June 16th.
June 16th. And it's going to be Joint Forest Practice and Management Committee.
Oh, Joint Forest Practice and Management Committee on the 16th, 9 a.m. Not
9 a.m.
Okay.
I think in this very building or in this very room, but
somewhere right here. Adjacent rooms are here. But thank you everyone online. Thank you very much for everyone in the room.
When do you end there?
Huh?
When?